Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more.
I'm Lexi.
I'm Nicole.
And today is our episode 6 deep dive of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, where we're covering chapters 39 through 47. As always, let's start with our content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on chapters 39 through 47 of Silver Flames, all of our episodes include spoilers for this entire book and the ACOSF series as a whole. While the majority of each Silver Flames episode does not include spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas' series, our deep dive of this book will continue in our Maasverse Madness segment, which is at the end of every episode, and we give a big spoiler warning before we bring in references from other SJM books, specifically the Crescent City series.
So with all of that said, if you didn't know that Gwen would name her sword Silver Majesty, then please go finish the series. We will be here when you're done.
Next up, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. Oh my God, especially this book. In other words, friends, this podcast is really rated R.
The time has come for PYHOTH, whether or not you know what that acronym whether or not you know what that acronym means. Dear God, please be mindful of those little listening ears today. Please.
I literally put in my annotations, I cannot say these things into a microphone today.
And I put them in my annotations that I can.
Friendly reminder, friends, as we deep dive Silver Flames, we recognize this book is divisive among the fandom, and it's okay for this community to have different opinions about characters and perspectives. With that said, though, please be respectful to us and to others as the conversation continues on other channels. Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events. We can't wait to dance the night away this weekend. Oh my gosh, that's coming up so quickly at Swords and Shadows Masquerade on November 23rd in Highlands Ranch, Colorado.
We are also going to be ringing in the new year at Fantastique Collection New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado.
We are partnering with Barnes & Noble for the Onyx Storm midnight release party on January 20th, 2025 in Glendale, Colorado.
We also have so much in store as podcasting partners at Romantasy BookCon in LA, February 20th through 22nd, 2025. And big surprise, big new news, we are going to be at Romantasy BookCon in Orlando, Florida, October 23rd through 25th, 2025.
We are so excited. Everything just got finalized, and you all, it is going to be an incredible event. Get your tickets soon. We will also be featured guests at Enchanticon in St. Louis, Missouri, August 15th through 17th in 2025.
Links to all of these events and more information are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOSF series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 3 tiers that you can join. The Valkyries, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, a book club, exclusive author interviews, community events, promo codes for live events, plus a discounted 20% off merch link. That's all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, special voting privileges, and our full episode outlines. That's for $10 a month. Or you can join the Inner Circle, which includes everything from the previous 2 tiers, plus more behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift from Lexi and I, giveaways, private Discord channel, and your name shouted out on the podcast. That is for $25 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also, of course, in the show notes. And really and truly, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you, and we appreciate you so much.
And now it is time to get our Zen on and practice mind stilling.
To kick off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing what happens in this stretch of chapters. So gather round, friends. We need an Inner Circle Debrief for Silver Flames, chapters 39 through 47.
Chapter 39. Still high off her never again mindset shift, we get a montage in which Nesta reaches step 6,000. We get training in the rain, and we get a new trainer. Welcome to the ring, Shadow Daddy Asriel. Gwen is sure happy to see you here. After practice one day, Gwen and Nesta sit in the library to learn a tactic of the Valkyries called mind stilling. And congrats, they didn't fall asleep. But Dang, it is harder than it sounds. Might I recommend an app for that? However, despite multiple focuses, Nesta emerges more at peace than ever before. Chapter 40, Field Trip Time. Cassian and Nesta go visit a blacksmith shop in Valaris, and it looks like Nesta's been reading Quicksilver because it's time to try her hand at pounding 2 swords and a dagger. The next day in the icy raining training ring, that forging fire is still raging in Nesta's blood, so she takes it out on the wooden punching bag. Ouch. But it looks like the peanut gallery is here because Lucian emerges to watch her train, and he's shocked that she's really training. However, as silver fire flickers in Nesta's eyes, her punching bag becomes a pile of freezing ashes. Lucian has only one thing to say: damn, bro! Just kidding. Mother spare you all. Chapter 40. It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Jelly Jubilee! No, it's sex god with a bod Helion, and he's flying in style in a golden chariot led by 4 snow-white horses with manes of golden fire! Oh wait, Rhys said no to that dream, so he compromised with a Pegasus. Everyone is in awe of this magnificent stallion. The horse, not Helion. Helion, a firm believer in save a horse, ride a cowboy. Later, up at the Moonstone Palace, after Helion assesses the Autumn Court soldiers, saying that they're not enchanted per se, just a little bit more under the influence, and it's not by Crown Royale. Aha! Our crew has the confirmation they need. Brialyn has the crown. Speaking of that pesky dread trove, Helion, can you put a ward around the masks so no one can pull a swiper no swiping and swipe it away? But with Brialyn having the crown, a new plan is afoot. Asriel, no more spying, something Asriel is quite salty about. And Nesta and Cassian, you need to talk to Eris about this new development. That night, Cassian brings Nesta more war books for her to read, but we all know that move, Cassian, and bang, bang, bangly bang. I said, put your hands on the headboard. Bang! Chapter 42. After a night of just sex, Cassian is summoned to the river house. The smell of Nesta dripping off of him like a teenage boy with Axe body spray. It turns out that the blacksmith paid Rhys a visit this morning, dumping the swords and dagger at his doorstep because they're evil. Oops, it looks like Nesta created a new dread trove on accident. I wish my accidents could be this badass and not I forgot to add the PDF to the email. But let's not tell Nesta that she has this new power. Okay, fine, let's put it to a vote. Amryn, desperate to get back to her bedmate, leaves with only one warning to the Bat Boys. Do not unsheathe those weapons. So the Bat Boys unsheathe the weapons, and oh boy, are they spooky. But Amryn knows these bros way too well and comes back with a gotcha. Oh, and Rhys, you should be High King because those blades can make you a conqueror. Queen of Subtlety, Amryn. Chapter 43. Later, we are back in the spring court, much to Cassian's allergies' dismay. A super pissy Eris starts coming at Cassian, but oh no, Nesta is one step ahead of this wannabe High Lord, and she accuses him of owning the Ash Arrows. Pretty sus, Eris. But then, what's that creeping out of the brambles? It's Man Bear Pig, who Nesta has no time for. So she rips Timmy Tam a new one, causing Tamlin to leave with his tail between his legs. That night, Nesta stares down into the black pit of the library, noticing slight movement in the heart of the darkness. Cassian finds her and pulls her to her room. Chapter 44. The next morning, after a delicious night where the temperature was a ripe 69 degrees, we're back in the training ring. Conversation moves to Cassian admitting that he knew the Valkyries personally, one very personally, and fought with them in the war, causing Gwen to absolutely squeal with excitement. So it is decided these females will become Valkyries born again, combining the Illyrian and Valkyrie techniques. Later at the Inner Circle dinner, in the dining room, it's Elaine's story time. She shares a story of a 14-year-old Nesta who was angry that Elaine was being bullied by another jealous teenager. Cute. So, as a healthy way to deal with her anger, she put on her spiteful hat and stole the hand of a duke right out from under the town bully's nose, all through the art of dance, even though she ended up turning down said duke. Yep, that sounds like Nesta. Chapter 45. Back in the training ring, this time with the even more sadistic than the Illyrian Valkyrie exercises. Sorry, ladies, no amount of mind stealing will help you here. Cassian asks each female what she would name a sword: Foe Slayer, Silver Majesty, or Debbie. But Nesta, curious about Cassian's insistence of her named weapon, coaxes it out of him that she imbued the swords and dagger with her magic. Well, Cassian, it does not go quite as you expected. Nesta, enraged, takes to the stairs, making it down all 10,000. Chapter 40.
I'm going to still celebrate that, even though this is not anything that we want to celebrate. But I'm still congratulating her for going down those 10,000 stairs.
I will congratulate her with stair math. Chapter 46. An irate Nesta barges into Amren's apartment, not even blinking twice at the fact that Rydam Cowboy is being used in a very different context. And these two once friends have it out at last. Let's throw another into the party, though. Fae-vorite enters the fray and tries to talk sense into her sister. But then Nesta, wanting to bring justice to these two sisters who were left out of important decisions, takes it a step too far, dropping the knowledge bomb about the baby's wings, Feyre's fate, and how her mate didn't tell her about it. Nesta immediately knows that she done fucked up and runs out of the apartment. Cassian, on a Nesta scavenger hunt, follows her scent down the steps and went to check for her at the river house, which puts him face to face with an "I'm about to commit murder" Rhysand. Time to get Nesta out of the city. Chapter 47. Swooping Nesta and a pack of supplies from Azrael up, Cassian takes Nesta to the great outdoors. Feyre knocks on Cassian's mind to check in and tell him that while Nesta will hate the outdoors, please take care of her. He will, trust me.
Woo! That was good. I know, these silver flames, we really got to pack a whole lot in these episodes.
That's what she said.
Oh, Nicole, you know what? Being an adult has its high points. Like we get to eat dessert for dinner. Or, of course, all of our favorites. We can stay up all night reading our favorite books. But it's not all fun. We also have to, do our taxes and take out the trash. Or at least my husband does that part, and make doctor appointments. But luckily for that one, we have ZocDoc, the healthcare app that makes adulting that much easier.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skin care, and much, much more. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, who are located nearby, who are a great fit for any medical need you may have, and who are highly rated by verified patients.
You can also see their actual appointment openings, choose a time that works best for you, and just click to instantly book an appointment. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within only 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. Huzzah!
We at Fantasy Fangirls use ZocDoc, and you should too. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/FF to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/FF. ZocDoc.com/FF.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing theories, and oh, so much more. We're picking right back up where we left off in this segment last episode, with Nesta feeling the fire of never again coursing through her as she goes down the stairs, quote, as if she had been freed from a cage she hadn't realized she'd been held in. This meekness beneath the cold exterior is not acceptable anymore. No more excuses. This big breakthrough reminds me of her mindset back in Act War and just how different it is now. Back then, she refused to train because she said there were other people to kill for her. A lot has happened since then, but more than anything, she realizes that she needs to step into that role herself. Gone is weakness and excuses. She is on a mission to become a warrior in skill and in her heart. We've talked so much on this podcast about Nesta tapping into her inner strength, and it's like after this never again breakthrough, she has truly unlocked that. She's lit a fire that cannot go out.
In this scene, Nesta makes it to step 6,000, almost double what she made it to last time, which go girl. And of course, it is time for stair math. This is the first episode this entire run where the equation has stayed the same. So my grade is slowly going up, hopefully. Nesta's climb down to step 6,000 is the equivalent to 500 rotations down the spiral staircase, or 0.86 miles / 1.38 kilometers one way, or Lexi, for your brain, 3.8 trips down the Empire State Building. Again, that's only one way. If we're going down and back, it's 1.71 miles or 2.75 kilometers, or 7.61 trips up and down the Empire State Building. Jesus Christ. Ow.
And I know with the miles, you got to factor in the exertion with going up and down and stuff like that. That is insane. Good for Nesta there. Wow.
I really want to figure out a time where you and I can go to my stair steppers here and just see how far we can make it. Let's put some time on the calendar, sis.
Sounds great. After being captivated by Nesta's never again movements with the sword, seeing what she was capable of and the strength, both physical physical and mental she was channeling, there's been a shift in the priestesses too. Not only have they shown up ready for training in the wet and cold, quote, as if they wanted the grit, the extra effort. There are 3 new priestesses at training now. Word must have spread about what Nesta did yesterday. The priestesses yesterday stopped and watched, and it was like everyone saw exactly what was happening. They must have returned to the library and told others, not just what Nesta did, but what they themselves felt in their own minds and hearts and the inspiration it stirred. Never again for any of them, which led more priestesses to say, yes, I want that too for myself.
The first sentence in this scene is about how the autumnal rains arrive the next day. And I love the symbolism of not only the seasons changing, but also our characters and their motivation and their impact on what they're wanting to make in their own lives. That is what changes with the seasons.
Yes, and that's a reoccurring theme really throughout Silver Flames, especially as they'll be going into springtime too, and the third part of our book with Valkyries. I love it so much. I also love how Nesta is in the center of the group, the leader of these female warriors in training to rise above their trauma and never again be weak.
But wow, with so many new faces here, it looks like we're gonna need another trainer. You know who's not doing much of anything, despite the fact that he was too busy to be the courtier, which takes much less time? Azriel, who joins as another teacher prior to going out and keeping an eye on Briellen, at least for now. While it's Azriel's job to help train the new priestesses, one of the priestesses under Cassian's care seems to be quite distracted watching the Shadow Singer. Cassian believes Gwen to be distracted because Azriel was the one who found Gwen at Sangrava and literally killed everyone around her who was hurting her. And Cassian curses himself for a fool because he didn't check with Gwen to see if it was okay that Azriel, someone who might trigger very horrific moments in her life, joined for training. But we readers can assume that her glancing at Azriel is a little bit more layered than that. Cassian cannot read the expression on her face, but he notices her multiple glances during the lesson. All I can think of is like in SpongeBob where the bubble episode where he's like, look once, look twice. Which is so not even close to the same thing, but that's where my mind is. We can assume that this is a moment where maybe Gwen starts crushing on this blue siphoned bat boy, which she's not the only one, because 2 other priestesses, Roslyn and Alana, sigh every time the Shadow Singer walks past. Hot commodity, Azriel.
I think the fandom would agree with that. Yes. Later in the library, Nesta and Gwen are tucked away in a quiet nook to begin their mind stilling. Unfortunately, living in Windhaven means Emery has to practice her mind stilling on her own. But here, Gwen is able to walk through how to mind still with Nesta because it seems easy. You just need to clear your mind, you know? Yet the fact that the Valkyries required months to practice the basics means that it must not be so easy. Throughout this sequence, I love how it's Nesta who's cracking jokes and being playful with her friend. Meanwhile, Gwen is in the zone, but there's such beauty to their ease and their close friendship.
While Lexi's going to go through all things Valkyrie in today's Suriel Teatime, I'm going to give a little TLDR on how to do some mind stilling. Number 1, find a comfortable and quiet place to sit. Number 2, take some deep breaths. Number 3, hope you don't fall asleep. And then acknowledge your feelings and let them go. Repeating over and over again, I am the rock against which the surf crashes. Ta-da! You've practiced mind stilling. If this sounds quite familiar, yes, I'm assuming this was highly, highly, highly inspired by meditation, which if you've ever practiced meditation, this was the most relatable scene I've ever read in my entire life, where Nesta's like thoughts start going and you don't even realize it as a reader because you're just so used to her train of thought. And then she goes, focus. And you're like, oh my God, I've said that exact thing to me before. It was so good.
Exactly. Well, and also, you know, like acknowledging your thoughts. You're not punishing yourself. You're giving yourself grace for letting these thoughts come and then washing them away. I love it so much. And you know what? This inner monologue we get from Nesta as she practices mind stilling for the first time, like you, Nicole, it is so relatable and it might be one of my favorites. You truly feel like you're in her mind, absorbed in the exercise and struggling to still her mind. Nesta has chased this feeling of quieting her mind for over a year, probably much longer than that. She escaped the thoughts she couldn't face with drinking, one-night stands, gambling, and music, which music is a good one out of all of those, by the way. I don't want to discount music by any means. Then in our story so far, she's physically exerted herself to feel that contentment, both in training with Cassian and going down the stairs. But here she is literally sitting with herself, nothing to distract her mind, and learn how to ease into this calm. I think Nesta has had to experience what she already has, especially with training and things like that, to get to a place to even be able to attempt this. Can you imagine if she tried mind stealing upon her initial arrival at the House of Wind? Now, she isn't afraid to sit with her thoughts or let them come to the surface, which enables her to let them go. Not run from them, but simply acknowledge these thoughts and let them wash over her before retreating again. Not surprisingly, mind stealing is way more difficult than it seems. Same, Nesta, same. I think we're all in that same boat. But as she practices, she thinks of Elaine and Gwyn and Amren and Thera, but she lets these thoughts exist and then she lets them pass her by. She doesn't chastise herself for thinking these thoughts or let herself spiral into a fury of negative emotions like she usually does or used to. She acknowledges that she feels this way and then keeps breathing. I'm so proud of Nesta and what this does for her, how far she's come. I know we will not be feeling that very much at the end of this episode, but in this moment, it really does show that your journey is never linear, and this is a really high moment here. As they wrap up the exercise, Nesta gives her mind permission to do as it wants and, quote, go drift into those dark, horrible places. It doesn't. Her mind simply sits there, resting and content, quote, and for the first time in her life, she felt utterly settled into her own skin. Oh my gosh, I just want to sit with that for a second. That is so makes me tear up, wonderful. She is actively learning how to regulate her emotions and thoughts. She is practicing self-awareness and, just as importantly, self-compassion, which is not a word we've associated with Nesta up until now. She's beginning to untangle her self-hatred and understand her thoughts as fleeting mental events instead of truth. She's tapping into the mind and body connection in a new way than the training has been doing and teaching herself how to self-soothe.
2 rainy days later, Nesta and Cassian find themselves outside a gray-stoned shop that, as Cassian notes, hasn't changed in 500 years since he's been shopping for all of his non-Illyrian weapons here. Now that is some customer loyalty, my God. But the point of this venture is to show Nesta how blades are made prior to practicing with a real blade. Remember, she's only been practicing with wooden ones. Quote, to show her that a blade is not merely a tool for killing, but a piece of art as well. What a well-rounded education.
Cassian's respect for his craft speaks volumes about his character. He recognizes the responsibility of knowing how to wield a weapon, knowing how and when to take a life, and he does not shoulder this responsibility lightly. I love how he introduces Nesta to this too, so she has a chance to understand and respect what goes into these weapons as well. And she's really interested. She wants to learn. She wants to soak up all the information she can.
While Cassian invited all of the Valkyries on this school field trip, Emery had to return to her shop, and the priestesses were unwilling to leave the mountain yet. So it is a solo field trip instead, or solo duet. It's a date field trip? I don't know what to call this.
As much as Cassian doesn't feel good at being a courtier, he certainly knows how to convince his blacksmith with his words. He does indeed know how to play the game, when it's on a different playing field, I'll call it, without the complexities of politics. Here, he's not talking to High Lord's son or having to figure out all the lies and truths and all of that kind of stuff, but he is charming and he knows how to play the game in that way.
Something I want to point out about this scene is that Cassian here introduces Nesta as Lady Nesta, and she does not blink an eye at that title. But in just a few chapters, sex god with a bod Helion will call her Lady Nesta, and she all but rolls her eyes at the name. It just really shows how comfortable she is with Cassian versus other people. And I love that little detail.
While this field trip was meant to show Nesta how weapons are made, she asks, that is so important, she's the one who initiates this, to try hammering the blades. She's not someone who sits on the sidelines anymore. She wants to roll up her sleeves and learn through practice. And hammer the blades, she does. It takes her a little bit to get into the rhythm, but after multiple swings with responding determination, she gets the hang of it. Nesta throws herself into hammering these blades. First the sword, then the dagger, and finally the great sword, which she spends the most time hammering. As Cassian reflects, Nesta herself was forged during the war, and now she is coming out stronger, more focused. She's truly coming into her own, and he is so, so proud, as he should be, and as she is of herself.
He even remarks on how this is the woman he knew in the war. I love that line because it calls back to the beginning of this book where he was like, where the fuck did she go? Here, Cassian, right here. She's here.
She pounds the sword to a music no one but her can hear. I love that, again, tying her directly to music. She hones in on this with a dedicated intensity to the point Cassian wonders, quote, what would emerge from the heat and shadows? Magic made weapons, that's what! Because Nesta took power directly from the Cauldron, it turns out she is capable of making, with a capital M, objects, just as the Cauldron is able to do. It cannot be underestimated how world-changing this power is. The Cauldron has made very few objects, all of which have played their own part in history because they are so effective and powerful. And now Nesta is an extension of the Cauldron, able to easily create these same insanely powerful weapons. So as she works on each of these weapons, she's transferring the essence of the Cauldron's power into these blades and creating 3 new made weapons, the likes of which this world hasn't seen in more than, they say 10,000 years, but it's 15,000 years, with the exception of Truth Teller, which we're not even going to touch on that being a made weapon here and all that. Because of the intense emotions that Nesta feels as she pushes herself, Amren will speculate that these made weapons are even more dangerous because of her internal feelings that intertwine with the power pouring into these objects. As Cassian will say, she was letting off some steam. Like, she is still so fired up from that never again pivotal moment for herself. And Amren will incorrectly think that she's got like this negative intensity when really I consider it a positive intensity.
Agreed. Creating really great retail experiences is tough. I don't know, this blacksmith's doing pretty good in creating a great retail experience, but especially with multiple stores, teams of staff, fulfillment centers, separate workflows, it can be a lot. But with Shopify Point of Sale, you can do it all without complexity.
Shopify's point of sale system is a unified command center for your retail business. It brings together in-store and online operations across 1,000 locations. Imagine being able to guarantee that shopping is just always convenient. Endless aisles, ship to customer, buy online, pick up in store, all made simpler so customers can shop how and where they want, and staff have the tools they need to close the sale every single time.
And let's face it, acquiring new customers is expensive. With Shopify POS, you can keep existing shoppers coming back to your store with consistent, tailored experiences and first-party data that gives marketing teams a competitive edge.
Want more? Check out shopify.com/FFG, all lowercase. There, you'll learn how to create the best retail experiences without complexity. Shopify.com/FFG.
Later at training, Nesta's fire is still raging in her soul, and she decides to use the last 15 minutes of training to spar with a padded wooden block. And I see this almost as the equivalent of like a punching bag, you know, that they do in, kickboxing, which Nesta notes how it feels so good to get it out. It meaning her feelings, it meaning her power. Quote, every punch carried her fear, her rage, her hate out of her body and into that wood. Cassian sees the shift in her, going to the place where thought and body become one. Oh God, I love that. But they are not alone. Lucian arrives because Feyre wanted a progress assessment from someone who hasn't seen her in a while. Honestly, while I do think Feyre should mind her own fucking business here, this is so on brand for our girl. She is known to be a bit of a busybody.
Yep, that's one way of saying it. We gotta love how Cassian is standing up for her. Of course, Nessa's actually training, and she's not a carnival attraction either. Lucian becomes quite disturbed, is what word for it, by this transformation in Nesta. He wonders if there are some things that should not be awoken, referring to her powers and her training to become a warrior. He's scared of her, plain and simple. Most people are. And I mean this in the best way for our girl Nesta. He's scared of her for a good reason, because as she goes through the series of punches, channeling her negative emotions out of her body and into the wood, she taps into her silver fire power. Now, I know that there was no mention during the blacksmith scene about her having that silver fire in her eyes. I do wonder that when she does get into the zone like this, whether she's hammering or punching or whatever, she taps into her silver fire power. While we're not in her POV during this moment, we can almost hear the echo of never again as she turns her anger into energy and power. I bet Lucian's presence and her feeling like that carnival attraction, here to be judged, heightened her emotions and made her push that much harder in this exercise. Because earlier she was in a pretty good mood and now she's not in a good mood and she's really we were just talking about like a positive intensity and now she's got those negative emotions back with herself.
Interesting, because I actually saw it as the opposite. I saw that, or not even the opposite, but as so neutral that she didn't even recognize or register that he was there. Like, she sees him, but she like just walks right past him. I think she's so in her own zone and so focused on herself and her training and her beating who she was yesterday, basically that attitude, that she's not even worried about being judged by Lucien. I think Cassian's the one who's like, don't you fucking judge my girl.
I see that perspective. I do think that she's ignoring him as part of her way of, I'm not going to acknowledge this because I do have these feelings, and she's pushing through for herself. When she finally finishes and the flicker of silver fire in her eyes vanish, Nesta walks into the house as if words are beyond her. And yes, her power did channel out of her along with her emotions, because the wooden beam glows from within, cold as ice. Then when Cassian touches it, the block dissolves into a pile of cinders. Once again, demonstrating this never before seen power of Nesta's, this power of death, if you will. Lucien's response to witnessing this? Mother spare you all. Notice how it's not us all, it's you all. And he says it twice.
He's like, just in case you didn't hear me the first time, I'm not involved.
He is saying you all, the Night Court, and their responsibility for Nesta and her unnatural power. He wants to distance himself from her as much as possible. This is the beginning of something big with Nesta, and not necessarily in a good way, according to Lucien. The next afternoon, we're back in the Hewn City. Yay! And our favorite High Lord of the Day Court has entered the chat. Also, real quick, I love how we just had a scene with Lucien, and then it cuts directly to Helion, who isn't so much scared of Nesta's power like Lucien, but he's intrigued by her. May I just say, it is so refreshing to have Helion back on the page again. I missed him and his playful nature. We kind of needed it right now.
Oh, yeah.
Helion Spellcleaver's power is detecting and breaking through magical wards and enchantments. So naturally, our crew has called in the expert to examine the Autumn Court soldiers and figure out this mystery spell they're under.
Fun fact, Helion's black stallion Pegasus is named Meowlin, whose name means pleasant little one, lump, or lion. One of these things is not like the other. All of these things are not like each other. What the hell happened?
Okay, y'all, I am obsessed with Pegasuses. I know we all love dragons and even griffins, but when the question comes up about what magical creature we would want, in my cowgirl heart, I would have to pick a Pegasus, but they are my absolute favorite. We learn a fun fact about these incredibly rare winged horses too. Lore states that there had once been far more of them, and they just vanished, quote, as if they'd been devoured by the sky itself. In the past 1,000 years, their population has dwindled even more, though no one can explain why. According to legend, the Pegasuses originated from the island where the prison is now, back when it was lush and full of life. Perhaps the reason their population has decreased so much is because their homeland vanished, and whatever had sustained them no longer exists in this world. This is the lore that I am here for.
After assessing Eris's soldiers in the dungeons and moving their gathering place to above the Hewn City that Helion likes much, much more, while the soldiers' bodies and actions are not their own, no spells or enchantments lay upon them. Instead, it feels more like they're under an influence, a fog that sways their minds. Well, shit. This is exactly what our crew feared. Briallyn definitely has the crown, and she's influencing the soldiers to do her bidding. So this is why the queens have fled their territories, either because they were terrified of Briallyn now having this hugely powerful object, or because they themselves were placed under the influence by Briallyn, and she was like, scoot, scoot, goodbye. Asriel does bring up a good point, though. How did Briallyn find the crown? Because she is made with a capital M, she would have been able to scry for the item. But Asriel assumes she got it when they were here during the war, i.e. when they were here for the meetings with Rhys, because they weren't here during ACOWAR, the battles themselves.
That we know of.
But if this was indeed when Asriel's talking about when she was here for the war, i.e. when she was here for the meetings with Rhys, she wasn't made then. I took this as a Cauldron boil me, but do you have an explanation?
I definitely understood it as her going to Prythian during ACOWAR when everyone was battling and she was already Fae. Like, she would have to already be Fae in order to find the crown. The queens were very quiet during ACOWAR, and it was assumed they were all holed up in their headquarters after the Cauldron incident in Hybern. I believe that's what Asriel's spies were saying, but it was also hush-hush that they really didn't know a whole lot that was going on with the queens. I have no idea how Briallyn would have gotten to Prythian, because as we know from Vasa, winnowing would have required all of the queens. Unless Koschei was already whispering in her ear and used his power to winnow her to Prythian, where all the fighting was taking place, so that that's when she could retrieve the crown and then go back. So I considered it more of like a secret mission that she was on.
That sounds very convenient. Another option also is that she had others retrieve the crown for her. Now, she wouldn't have been able to use the crown's influence like she did with the Bog of Urid and the soldiers and wait till, Nesta's there to get the mask, all that kind of stuff, because she wouldn't have had the crown yet. So maybe she convinced, or even Koschei convinced someone to go get the crown for Briellen, because maybe someone who specifically could winnow.
Possibly. That sure would seem risky, but you never know. Yeah. The bottom line is, I don't believe we ever get official confirmation how or when Briellen got the crown. I will be curious if we find out from Koschei in an upcoming book, or if this is just one of those plot questions that never gets answered and everything moves on.
I'm leaning towards the latter.
Me too. But back to the mask at hand. First of all, Helion Spellcleaver is shocked that Nesta was able to put this mask on and live to tell the tale.
Which, pause, because when the mask is unveiled, Helion has like a visceral reaction to it, saying it rakes its cold claws down your senses. Ugh. I only hear like nails on a chalkboard. Ugh. But Fae-vorite, Nesta, and the Bat Boys are all like, we don't feel that. This feels like a huge Easter egg line, especially when it's followed up by Helion saying, quote, perhaps an ancestor of mine used it and the warning of its cost is imprinted on my blood. What? This cannot be a throwaway line.
I want to know so much more about this too. Yes, absolutely. I do have a few things that I want to say to continue in Maasverse Madness, but what I can say here is while I'll take Helion's word at face value, I also have to wonder if there's something about his spell cleaving magic that is repelled by the mask. Yep. Or because he is the decor and it represents light and life, the mask is the opposite with its power of death. I have no idea. I just wanted to throw that out there. Helion's here to give the wards around the mask super strength and tie them directly to Nesta so that not even Briellen can enter, because remember, she is also Cauldron Maid and can similarly access the trove despite usual wards. The idea here is that Helion adds the element of Nesta's blood to the wards, so they are strictly connected only to her, and she is the only one who can unward them, making it theoretically impossible for even Briellen to enter. Nesta is all for giving this ward super strength, but she refuses to know how to unward it. Her reasoning makes sense. She doesn't want to have any knowledge of how to free the mask if she's captured by Briellen. But we know the real reason. Based on her reflections back in the Moonstone Palace's infinity pool of my dreams, she is scared of her own temptation. Because when she wore the mask, she blissfully felt nothing in her head. It was that feeling she's been chasing for so long, and she's scared of how good it felt. So instead, Helion shows Rhys how to unward it, and if it's ever necessary, Rhys will show Nesta so she can dissolve the wards. Spoiler alert, none of this will matter, because Nesta can summon the Dread Trove no matter the wards. But at least Briellen or the bad guys can't get in.
With the confirmation that the crown is definitely in play, a new plan must be concocted. First up, Asriel, no more spying on Briellen.
Aw, shucks.
Which pisses off the Shadow Singer. Asriel takes his job very, very seriously and prides himself on not failing. And he views this step down Asriel as a failure, I believe. So when Mom and Dad / Rhys and Feyre say no more because the crown's work is based off proximity, Asriel unsuccessfully fights back. If Briellen realizes that Asriel is there though, she can put him under control. So honestly, I'm with Rhys and Feyre on this. Like, that makes so much sense. Second part of the new plan, we have to tell Eris that his soldiers are under the crown's influence, but not tell him that they have the mask. Ally or no, that mask is such a powerful object that, as we will see later, Eris is quite uncomfortable with another court possessing it. Rhys, however, turns to Nesta and gives her the choice to go with the new courtier Cassian and talk to Eris. When surprised, Nesta asks, "Why are you giving me this?" Rhys's only response is, quote, "Because you savor playing the game." I think that this is way more than that. Last episode, when Rhys woke up Nesta from her nightmare, there was such an understanding that Rhys held for Nesta. I believe he's seen that shift in her back into this steadfast Archeron determination person that he saw during the war. And this is him reaching out his own hand, saying, "Hey, there's a place in this court for you if you want." And again, I have to bring up that C word, choice, because he literally says, "It's your choice, Nesta."
As they're leaving the room, we have to call out what Nesta is reading and why. Unlike the romance book Cassian initially thought she had, Nesta admits that she's reading a brief history of the Great Sieges because she realizes there's a lot for her to learn in battle strategy, and most importantly, she wants to be her own weapon. She doesn't want to be trained to be someone else's weapon. She wants to know how to wield herself, to be in control control and to lead others. What's that? Lead others? You heard Nesta right. Quote, perhaps a small unit of females. Remember back to our first few episodes of Silver Flames, where Nesta didn't care what happened to her, had no vision for the future, didn't even feel she deserved much of a future, and struggled to survive in her own skin every single day, every single moment. Now she is empowered to become a warrior, and not just a warrior, but lead other females. In so many words, resurrect the Valkyries to be both something new and old. She is beginning to truly comprehend her new lifespan too. I know I've talked a lot on the podcast about the Archeron's human concept of time and how different it is from the immortal Fae. And here Nesta is enthusiastically acknowledging she has hundreds of years to live, where she wants to achieve greatness, be a strategist, be a warrior, be a role model, and a leader to other females seeking that strength and skill. Cassian recognizes how pivotal planning for the future is for Nesta, as he thinks, quote, it was a hell of a good sign. He has seen firsthand the change and growth in Nesta over these past weeks, but to hear her big goals for the future stated so plainly, it is monumental. We all know how important it is for Nesta and Thera to have goals to work toward. Nesta's initial goals after moving into the House of Wind were simple baby steps. Gone are the baby step days, as she now makes leaps and bounds. Her goal isn't just to do a day of training or to get that next sit-up, right? It's to eventually be a skilled enough military expert and battle commander to lead females at wartime. Wow! Honestly, Nesta as a general feels so fitting and also terrifying in the best way possible because she is so badass.
Speaking of badass, nothing makes me feel more badass than busting out cozy sweaters. That is why we love Quince.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And it's not just that. All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. That includes beautiful leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim, and so much more. How are they able to do that? Well, let me tell you, by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, which passes the savings on to us customers. Yay!
And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And of course, premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. Last night, I ordered a pair of Quince leggings. Lexi, you've been talking about your Quince leggings.
I love them so much. In fact, I'm wearing them right now.
That I was like, I need it. So I definitely ordered one last night. I'm so excited to receive them. I will keep you all posted.
Get cozy in Quince's high quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/FFG for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/FFG to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/FFG.
All right, Lexi. Later that night.
Oh boy.
Cassian knocks on Nesta's door, bringing her more war books. But that's just his excuse for being here. In reality, he is held out as long as he possibly can. After wanting to give her some time because she was so focused on training and throwing herself into being a Valkyrie, Cassian didn't want to be selfish and just be like, yo, I know you're turning your life around and shit, but like, wanna fuck? He respects her and her own journey way too much to act selfishly like that. I'll say selfishly, but it is both parties who wants it. Plus, as he notes, he needed time to keep some of himself intact and not just get lost into nonstop sex with Nesta. Huge mating bond alert there.
The books may be his excuse to knock on her door and see her this evening, but ultimately he's leaving it entirely in her court if she wants to invite him in. He's even forcing himself to move toward the door and leave before she speaks up asking why he hasn't sought her out for more bangity bang.
Nesta has taken the distance that Cassian has put between, the two of them as him not having enjoyed himself the last time they bangity banged. No, Nesta Archeron. He enjoyed himself too much, which brings us to probably the most famous sex scene in this book.
Real quickly, as we ask ourselves, every single one, is this for sex or is this for plot?
I think that this one was for plot because this was them. I think it's skirting the line if I'm being honest, but I'm going to lean towards saying plot because this was their, hey, no, like I actually want to do this with you. This is not just lust overtaking everything or I need to feel alive. This was, hey, no, like we actually want to be friends with benefits and continue this on. Plus, there's that line after the first time they have sex, right before put your hands on the headboard, where she's like, I still need more. And he's like, I know. And that right there is just like a mate's neon sign. So I'm going to lean towards this is for plot, but it's really skirting the line. I don't think it needed to be as detailed as
I was going to say, I think the level of detail is for sex sake, but I do agree with you that having this sex scene in general does enhance the plot and their relationship.
Yeah. Which, speaking of which, let's dive into the sex scene because it starts with a side-by-side comparison of Nesta masturbating in front of him.
Are you actually going to do a play-by-play of this whole scene?
Not the whole scene.
Oh my God.
But the game is always afoot with these two because while Nesta touches herself, Cassian is not allowed to touch himself or her. Which you are doing a play-by-play. Okay. I have a point. Hold on. Which Cassian does obey for all of like 2 seconds before his hand unknowingly starts drifting southward. Side note, I love how later Nesta acknowledges how she was in a completely vulnerable position and she didn't feel an ounce of embarrassment or shame.
I really love this part so much because that line from Nesta, you know, after all of it, it is such a healthy sign.
Yes.
And it's not because she wasn't embarrassed because her brain was too foggy or anything like that. No. There is absolute clarity here.
Yes.
And it is that connection with him and that safe space that they have created together.
And that is what I think that this sex scene is so good at doing, at least this first part of it, is it's such a beautiful reminder for us reading it that with the right partner, sex is so open. It is vulnerable, but it's not from a place of like, oh my God, should I have done that? It's from a place of both parties being like, I'm game. This is great. And there's no embarrassment or shame associated with it. Like, not going into details by any means, but like, I know that there's been times in my life that I have maybe done something and been like, oh God, like there's just this immediately shame around it. And that has never been the case with partners who I felt this complete open trust with. But then there's a side-by-side comparison to be had. So she lets him have at her and he goes to town. Only when he is absolutely begging for her, saying, whatever you want, whatever you need from me. So we're going back to our point system, Lexi. Who gets the point in this scene, at least right now?
Everybody gets 1,000,000 points in this scene. I've thrown the scoreboard out the window and I'm just giving everybody points now.
I'm shocked you didn't throw it out the window with put your hands on the headboard. I felt like that was the point where you're going to be like, Cassian wins.
Well, yes.
No,
Yes.
Okay, cool. During part 1 of this sex scene, we get a huge mating bond hint. Oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this. Quote, he needed more, it needed to be deeper, it needed to crawl so far inside her that there would be no disentangling them. Mating bond. Like that is so huge right there.
You know what I should have done is I should have started a count for how many times you say mating bond about this book.
There's so many instances. It is so in your face. But you know what? For that sass, I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh dear.
After a little unknowing wing play, they are both totally spent and Nesta finishes, quote, milking him. What are your thoughts on the word milking, Lexi?
I didn't even realize that word was part of the scene. I guess I skirted over it. It's accurate, I guess. You know what, Nicole? When you write your book and you have your spicy scenes, let's see what words you use.
All right, touche. All right, we move into part 2 of this scene because they still need more. Commanding her to get on her hands and knees, he tells her to put your hands on the headboard and hold on tight. I'm just like kicking my legs up in the air right now. Cassian, you win.
You win. And the fandom goes wild. In all seriousness, I feel like one of the big reasons this sex scene stands out for so many of us readers is because ACOTAR was many of our introductions to romantasy. Sure, I've read Spice before, but like Nicholas Sparks way back when, nothing like this. Between the drawn out foreplay and the rough but safe intimacy, it was a new reading experience, at least for me. And like in your love letters to Smut, Nicole, it is two consenting adults having so much fun with sex, finding so much pleasure in the tease and the unleashing and the put your hands on the headboard kind of things that it made me go, oh wow, but in a good way. And the fact that it's Cassian of all the book boyfriends, and again, he's my number one, and these sorts of scenes are definitely a contributing factor. That's all I'm going to say. The next morning, Cassian, who absolutely 1000% smells like sex with Nesta, is summoned to the river house. Uh-oh, this can't be good. Turns out the blacksmith he and Nesta visited the other day came by the High Lord and Lady's estate to drop off these 3 blades Nesta hammered. Why? Well, the blacksmith was in a panic and wanted nothing to do with these weapons, claiming they're cursed and they're Risenko's problem now. Oh dear. Understandably, the group grills Cassian about what the hell happened when he and Nesta went to the blacksmith shop to make him dump them here afterward. Without anything to hide, Cassian explains that she hammered the blades so she could get a sense of the hard work that went into making weapons. But that's it. There was no cursing or anything like that. However, hearing that Nesta hammered the blades is all that it takes for Rhys to stiffen and, along with Amren, put 2 and 2 together.
Amren, being the only one old enough to know the true magnitude of these weapons, and Rhys, who probably learned the magnitude from Amren, exchange a look of dread. Because Nesta put her power into these swords and dagger, these weapons are now Cauldron made, with enough power to literally change the course of history, just as the last made sword, Gwydion, did.
Before we keep going with the scene, let's take a moment to explain Gwydion, the last of the magic swords, dark as night and just as beautiful. It belonged to the first and only High King Fionn, who united the people of Prythian after defeating the Daglin, who had previously ruled over the Fae. In fact, Fionn defeated the Daglin with the help of Gwydion, because Gwydion was made with the power of the Cauldron, and it had magical abilities, like killing the unkillable and all-powerful Daglin. It was given its powers when the High Priestess Olenna dipped it into the cauldron during its crafting. During High King Fionn's rule, his queen and fiercest general betrayed him, and with his downfall, the sword passed to his queen. Gwydion disappeared around the same time that the last of the Dread Trove vanished, and now it's been missing for millennia. Amren says 10,000 years, but it's actually 15,000 years. So in the context of our story, these 3 weapons made by Nesta are equivalent to Gwydion, which is crazy! That sword led the change in history, and it is still part of legend 15,000 years later.
We know because the blacksmith would have had to touch these swords that they are not deadly to the touch per se. But as we will see in the prison scene, these weapons have the capability to kill the unkillable, like Lanthus. As Cassian notes later when they're unsheathing the weapons, no death by these blades would be normal. It would be agonizing beyond belief. And I can't help but think about the pain that Nesta experienced when she went into the cauldron. Almost like her terror of what happened to her would be inflicted on an enemy struck by these blades. Amren and Rhys are extremely shaken, not only because these 3 objects have insane power, but because it's like fate dropping the biggest 180-degree turn on your doorstep. This is them realizing, holy shit, we now have 3 weapons that have not been seen in over 15,000 years, something that previously only great powers could do. Again, this is them realizing, holy shit, Nesta's powers are so much bigger than we ever thought possible. Cassian, however, is looking at these as an opportunity, who's surprised there, rather than something to fear. Again, just a wonderful nod to how truly unafraid of Nesta he is. He wonders if Nesta could create an arsenal of weapons filled with this same magic that would allow them to win any war. Brialyn, Kostje, Baron, anyone would not even be a threat to them going forward.
I will say I'm a little surprised that Cassian is viewing Nesta as a weapon right here, after she recently told him she didn't want to be someone else's weapon. I'm assuming he's caught up in the possibilities of what this power can do, and that she would want to wield this kind of power to take down her enemies, but just a little thing I thought of.
That's kind of more how I took it, like how he realized after she was reading the war books that she does want to have I'll say career in military, but you know what I mean there. And this is almost like, oh my God, what if this is supposed to be her destiny, where she's creating. So I viewed it more as Cassian seeing this as an opportunity for Nesta to really step into that power. But you do make really good points as if this would be against her will and using her against her will in that weapon sense. So yeah, that's totally fair.
I won't say using her against her will, because he knows better than anyone that Nesta would never do that. But it is that using her as a weapon.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But there's one person who is notably missing from this conversation. The person who unknowingly made these weapons in the first place. When the conversation comes down to telling Nesta, there is a massive divide amongst the room. On one hand, Nesta didn't know what she was doing. On the other hand, because she didn't know what she was doing, she didn't know what emotion she was pouring into these weapons. She made these objects into utter mysteries that could release their catalyst of power without any warning, making them incredibly dangerous. But on the other hand, Nesta could put a magical war-winning weapon in the hand of every Night Court warrior. On the other hand, who knows what chaos that could bring if there was a bad egg in the war camps, like Callan. Fuck you, Callan. Or as Amren notes, what if in one of her angry moods, she makes a weapon that would spite them all? Personally, I agree with Cassian here. This offhanded remark just shows how much she doesn't know Nesta at her core, / just how angry Amren is with Nesta. But trust us, we'll get into that later. So the vote is at a standstill. Rhys and Amren vote for not telling Nesta about these world-altering weapons. With Amren, I get she's pissed. She's lost all hope in Nesta. Do I agree with Amren? Absolutely not. But do I understand it? Kind of. Rhys, however, is kind of surprising. You literally, my guy, just reached your hand out to Nesta because you saw her getting better. I do think his vote makes sense within his character. A, he's not thinking clearly. He's terrified for his mate and baby, and he's actively making decisions very reactively. B, he's still very afraid of Nesta's powers after seeing only the surface of it in action when he pulled her out of her nightmare. This could very easily unleash her power upon the world, which would be terrifying.
And also, I don't think that this is necessarily within Rhys's character, but it is something to consider. He is the most powerful High Lord, and he has that title. And Nesta, with this kind of power, her power is already very scary, and especially because she doesn't know how to use it very well, and nobody really understands it. But I'm not saying that she would compete for a High Lordship or anything along those lines, but to be that powerful as the most powerful person already, he's like, no, like, you don't get that. I don't feel like that's very Rhys, but I had to point it out.
Well, I want to kind of go with that for a second, because I do agree that him being like, no, I'm the most powerful. That's not Rhys. But he is so used to being a step above everyone. So I do see subconsciously him being like, wait, no, if someone's more powerful than me, that has only ever been bad. I mean, Kosje is a great example. Anyone in the prison is a great example. Like, those have only ever been bad. So I see definitely subconsciously how Rhys would be like, no.
And they do, as much as he talks about choice and stuff, they do want an element of control over Nesta because she is so unpredictable.
And the last one I'll even bring into this mix is Rhys is also currently keeping a huge piece of information from his mate. So keeping secrets these days is all just like in a day's work for him. So I don't think it's like, egads, we can't keep a secret. Like, he's already doing that with Feyre.
Yep.
However, on the flip side, Azriel and Cassian are like, fuck no, we have to tell Nesta because she has to...
Wait, real quickly, because I'm so glad that Azriel is in that boat too. It shows how much he is also recognizing this progress in Nesta as well. And he always wants to give her the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't say bad things about Nesta because I think that he really does like her and understand her and her trauma. And he wants to help her in a way that Rhys and Amren don't.
It's almost like the two people who know her best and have seen her every single day are voting for her, and the two people who are voting with the knowledge of like several months ago Nesta are voting against her. How interesting. Because Nesta does have the right to know the lengths of her own powers. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Nesta has the right to know about the lengths of her own powers. This is a terrible comparison, but I can't help but think about how Tamlin and Lucien held Feyre back from discovering her own powers back in ACOSF. Now, to be fair, that was to keep her safe, air quotes, and to keep her out of the other High Lord's clutches, versus here where it's keeping deadly weapons that could change the course of humanity. So the stakes are a little different, but it still feels that same controlling element. So Feyre will be the deciding vote when she comes home from painting, which Feyre will not even hesitate before saying, yeah, I agree with Azriel and Cassian. Nesta should absolutely know something that would alter her own fate. I'm going to get 2 seconds here because Rhys, you idiot. You should have known the second you saw this reaction from Feyre that this is your neon sign that your mate should know the big secret that you're keeping from her. Like that, I love Rhys. He is slowly deteriorating as my number one book boyfriend, though. Like,
yeah, this deep dive, as much as we are putting ourselves in his shoes, I'm not agreeing with him at all. Not like I did beforehand, but now it really is in our faces.
Yeah,
literally.
Like, during ACOMAF and even ACO War, and fuck it, even ACOTAR, I could see where he was coming from for the greater picture. It is really hard to see that side of Rhys in this, and that was always the thing that drew me closest to him. So there's several other book boyfriends that are quickly overtaking him in positions right now.
Well, let's talk about that big secret that Rhys is keeping from his mate. Almost all of his remaining hope in helping Feyre with the birth and finding a solution to the baby with wings, it went out the window when he learned the Seraphim's wings are flexible and bend easily during birth. Remember that Rhys had gone to Draken and Miriam to see if they could help him, since Miriam had birthed children with wings. Quote, but, this is sad, as much as we're giving Rhys a hard time. Quote, I didn't realize how much I'd been holding on to until I saw the pity and fear in their faces, until Draken had to embrace me to keep me from falling apart. Even the clock ticking in the room feels like a mockery of the time that Feyre has left in this world, and what they need is a miracle. It doesn't matter how powerful the most powerful High Lord is. It doesn't matter how wealthy he is, or how knowledgeable he is, or how many resources he has. There is nothing he can do to save his mate, and it's destroying him from the inside, especially as he carries this burden, terrified of telling her and passing that fear and hopelessness to Feyre. I talked a lot about this last episode, so I won't get into it again, but this right here is why he's not telling her. Again, we're not making excuses for Rhys. He should have told her, especially when choice is so important, especially when Nicole pointed out that Feyre was like, yeah, my sister needs to know about this very important thing about her life. And I see his perspective. The last remaining hope is that there is something somewhere in Helian's 1,000 libraries, that someone in history must have studied this and found a solution. So Helian now has his researchers on it as they race against the clock to try and find anything that can help Feyre.
Rhys mentions earlier how he begged on his knees to Helian for any information in these libraries to help Feyre. This is a big deal because, as we know from ACOMAF, Rhys has the Night Court tattoos on his knees because he will get on them for no one but his territory and, in Chapter 55, for his mate. Sadly, it is now not him getting on his knees for his mate in a fun way. It is him getting on his knees for his mate's survival. Wanting to distract his brother from the soul-wrenching pain, mischievous Cassian recommends that they have a look, despite Amren's warning not to. I love the humor in this scene after something so heavy from Rhys. We get a peek into these three Bat Boys and their true brotherhood. Azriel is more of a quiet rule follower. Cassian is definitely the bad influence, and Rhys is easily influenced by Cassian. I want all the stories of them when they were younger because I guarantee you it was just younger.
Yep, all of this. All of it checks out.
It doesn't take much convincing, and the three gather around as Rhys uses his powers to raise the weapons up and unsheathe them, despite the weapons fighting against his magic, just like Nesta's magic fought against Rhys's in the Nightmare. First up, we have the Great Sword, which is unsheathed and it glows like moonlight lies within the metal. And iridescent sparkles crack among the blade until they absorb within the metal. The second sword, much smaller than the Great Sword, doesn't spark, but it does get hot, angry, and willful. And the dagger radiated cold, gleaming like an icicle in the sun. But then we hear a soft female laugh from the door. Amren knows these bitches way too well to know that they would not heed her warning. So she enters in and tells them about one other sword like these weapons. Narbin. I've been waiting for this. Even older than Gwydion, Narbin was lost until it was rumored that Amarantha found it from somewhere, and when it would not bend to her will, she threw it into the sea, Andalasi, rather than letting the king of Hybern obtain it.
Amren notes that she heard about this while Rhys was under the mountain, so this was actually quite recent. Amren heard this rumor from a fleeing water nymph that Amren had thrown the magic sword into the sea. It was like one of those, it was quite the game of telephone.
Yeah.
But this was kind of recent, which I'm so excited for what all the possibilities are. I really do think that Narbin is going to come back into play.
Amren says here that Amarantha destroyed it, but throwing it into the sea does not feel like destroying it to me. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, cool.
That is not how these magic swords are destroyed. Absolutely not.
Fun fact, Narbin in German means scar. That's the only tie into anything SJM that I could find with Narbin. So I don't know, could mean something.
Amren goes on with a record-scratching proposal. With these 3 made weapons, Rhys can make himself High King. What? High King? No, we haven't had one of those in a long time.
You mean 15,000 years?
Yes, 15,000 years. He can be the one to unite all 7 courts under one ruler, so Prythian has far better odds of survival against any upcoming conflict. We saw how difficult it was to get all the courts together in ACOWAR. With a High King, they would be stronger as one. And with a land united under a powerful king and queen, armed with powerful objects, their enemies would, at the very least, hesitate. First, think of them as the vulnerable separate territories that they are now. Azrael brings up that Kallias, Tarquin, and Helion might bend the knee without an internal war, and Thiessen will if the others do. That just leaves Baron, who's already a major problem, and Tamlin, who has essentially abandoned ruling his land anyway. And while the fandom has big feelings about Rhys potentially becoming High King, let's look at this from the perspective of why he would be quite the contender to take this position. And let's take the made weapons out of the equation. Rhys is a skilled diplomat and is dedicated to protecting all of Prythian, not just his own court. He knows how to forge alliances, and he has showcased an ability to gain respect and trust even after wearing the bad guy mask for hundreds of years. He also genuinely cares about his people and works toward improving their lives. Call back to Tarquin's dream of equality between the High Fae and Lesser Fairies. Rhys shares this dream, and Valaris is the gold star of inclusion, equality, and freedom. As High King, Rhys could enact these reforms on a grander level. From this point of view, him being High King makes sense. Although I don't think the people in the Hewn City would agree with this, but they suck, right? So that's why he's not a very good guy to them. Azrael and Cassian are on board with Amren's suggestion, believing it makes, again, absolute sense. Amren even assumes Farah will be on board because she'll see it as a necessary evil to protect their child from being born into war. I think Amren's kind of using the baby part of this a little to her advantages with that manipulation. Oh, yeah.
Remember the whole manipulating Nesta by using Elaine? She is absolutely manipulating Rhys by using Nyx here. Amren's not my favorite character in this stretch of chapters. I'm going to be real.
And I flip-flop a little bit on whether I believe that Farah would agree they should become High King and Queen. She is not power hungry, but she is ambitious. And while she would never have malicious intent, I could see her considering it if and only if it is not a conquest. The moment that any innocent lives would have to be killed or there would be something brutal to this, she would be like, nope, I'm out of here. I don't want this.
I think at first I was like, Farah would not do this. And then I thought about Farah in ACOWAR and like kind of that role she steps into. And I'm like, yeah, I could see her doing it with your caveat of if there's no conquest. Rhys, however, is like, no thank you and fuck no. Conquest of power is not in Rhysand's nature. It can be all summed up in this one sentence, quote, I only wish to be here with my mate and my people. And he means it. I think that this is SJM prepping us that there is going to be a high ruler, and because it's Rhys and he's flawed, but he's not a bad guy, she wants to take him completely off the table as an option so people don't start picking sides, like for readers. I also think that Rhys hears Conqueror and his mind immediately goes to Baron, the King of Hybern, Brialyn, Amarantha, people they've been fighting since day one of our journey in this book. All of these terrible people who wanted to rule over others. Yes, his intentions and motivations would be very different, but what would the cost be of getting there? However, I also feel like the weapons fighting against Rhys's magic is a huge clue for us readers. Amren here is saying that these weapons will make you High King, but the weapons don't even want him to touch them. And it's like the weapons don't want him to be High King, so why would he be?
Exactly. She pushes that this is Rhys's fate and that this is a sign from the Cauldron that he should be High King because fate has led these made weapons to him. However, he won't be their true master. Like Amarantha, he won't be able to bend these weapons to his will. But Nesta is the true master, at least of the Great Sword, which is the most powerful. So when Amren says that the Cauldron's benevolence will be extended to Rhys only for so long before it's offered to another, I think it's going to be offered to Nesta.
I think that this is a stepping stone for it to be offered to Nesta. I don't even think that this is them offering themselves to Rhys. If I'm looking at fate,
yes,
I'm thinking that this is the penultimate step before it reaches the finish line.
I absolutely agree. All of this talk about being able to wield these weapons and things like that, it does make me wonder about Eris and his relationship with the maid dagger he is gifted. Perhaps it's something to do with Rhys's magic and Eris just isn't as powerful. I don't know, but Eris doesn't seem to have any issues with his maid dagger.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. I cannot help but point out that whenever Nesta is around High Lords, she makes them balk, just like we saw with Helion earlier in this chapter stretch. I feel like it's priming us readers to believe her to have this position of power over them. Have I mentioned how many fucking queen counts there are in this book? I just feel like there is not a scenario where this book ends and Nesta is not High Queen. Now, I will say, I think we readers are missing lots of plot that is going to get her from where she is right now to High Queen. But I'm excited for that journey that we're about to go on because I don't see Rhys and Feyre ending up as High King and Queen at all.
Yeah, I don't either. And I do agree that this idea of a high ruler, whether that be a king or queen, it will absolutely be part of the next ACOTAR book plot. There is political strife, and someone becoming the high ruler may become a pivotal debate that creates conflict among the courts. Then, of course, we have Koschei, who is a very big threat. So time could be of the essence with uniting the courts, but obviously with this different spin than ACOWAR, right? We also can't forget about Nyx and his potential role as heir to Rhys and Feyre. If his parents were to become High King and Queen, does he automatically become the heir to Prythian? Does that make him a threat to others' powers? Or is he too young to even be on the chessboard? If his life was at risk, I don't think Rhys and Feyre would want to be High King and Queen for another reason. Now, does that mean that Nesta would be willing to become a conqueror, and would Cassian be okay with something like that? Nesta would definitely be more okay with it than Rhys. I'll say that.
The weapon's called a Nesta. So It's like she wouldn't be fighting against them. And I feel like because they called a Nesta, they would call it a Cassian too. What I wish we had in this scene, and I feel like it was left out on purpose, was Cassian touching the weapons or interacting with the weapons in some way.
I wonder if the other sword, maybe not the great sword, because of course that'll be Ataraxia and that'll be Nesta's, the dagger belongs to Eris. What if the sword belongs to Cassian?
I think that would be so poetically beautiful. I still have no fucking idea why Eris has the dagger. Like, that is such a question mark to me, but alas.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. With this month especially being all about gratitude, I want to give an especially big shout out to my husband, Jake, who has done so much for our family and Fantasy Fangirls. Guess who watches the kids while we do these recordings, everybody? But you know what? There's someone in particular we all don't thank enough, ourselves. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we are trying our best, and navigating the highs and lows of life, it isn't easy. Here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourselves.
Therapy has been insurmountable to teaching me different techniques to deal with stress, anxiety, and gratitude.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge.
Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/FFG today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/FFG. We move away from High King theories to a part of the territory in which the High Lord honestly could use a High King. We are back in the Spring Court, much to Cassian's allergies' dismay. Question: Nesta here mentions that she had allergies back in the human realm. Did they just go away? Do they not exist in Prythian? Was the Cauldron the ultimate Claritin D, which means she never has allergies again?
I suppose so. That was human Nesta. Now, as High Fae Nesta, she does not have the same problems. I'll also venture a guess that High Fae don't have allergies, but Cassian, being an Illyrian who is not High Fae, he does have allergies.
I'd say that's the weirdest conversation we've had on this podcast, but that is
really?
so not even
that's
close
the
to
weirdest?
accurate. No. Which, this in the Spring Court is as good a time as any for a plant watch. Purple lilacs are mentioned, which specifically light purple lilacs symbolize first feelings of love or one's first love, which both are accurate here. The first love being Tamlin and first feelings of love being Nesta and Cassian. Anyway, Eris finally deigns to show up, and Cassian, cut and dry, shares the information of Eris's soldiers. Most are dead, 2 are alive, and they've all been turned into mindless killers by Briellen and Koschei, which immediately has Eris be like, 2. Very convenient. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of with Eris on this one. That seems super sus if you're in his shoes. Causing him to laugh.
Why?
Because they only kept 2 soldiers alive, because if you torture 2 people, you have to be able to compare their stories back, like to each other.
See, I just think that's smart. Eris should know that already.
They're supposed to be allies, though. That's the wrench. Eris starts lashing out on Old Reliable, calling Cassian brute names, saying, quote, "Let's not lie to ourselves. You only bothered to contain two by the time your brute bloodlust ebbed away." While Eris is being quite a dick, and I don't agree with that, it is notable that Eris is distraught and quite protective over his own and his soldiers. It's just a little peek behind the scenes of how he would be as a High Lord versus Baron, who is like, "Some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make."
Eris is wrong in his assumption, though. Cassian and Azriel strategically left two alive so they could play them off one another. As Cassian would say, more than just a brute after all.
Nesta, unlike Cassian, relishes in playing the game, and she's so damn good at it. Seeing how Eris is bringing up Old Reliable, calling Cassian a brute, she brings up how it is so interesting that the soldiers had ash arrows, a weapon that is banned in Prythian. Weapons they may have gotten from the Autumn Court, perhaps saving them for a certain assassination of a High Lord. Got 'em.
Ha! Love her taunt of, "So are you saving those ash arrows for your father?" Not so subtly saying, "Remember, we know your secret, so behave as our ally."
But Eris, looking for anything to get back the upper hand, notices a hand on Nesta's back, giving him the ammunition to use her to get to Cassian. And he starts flirting. And I'm not gonna lie, it works instantaneously. Cassian, again, is new to his courtier role, but above all, he is not someone who relishes in playing the game. As Reese said last episode, he is someone who wears his heart for all to see. One of the many reasons why we love him so much.
And why Nesta does too, especially because she is not like that at all. She admires this quality in him.
But then a soft growl and soft paws sound behind the brambles.
Rawr, Tambear Pig! But seriously, Tamlin in beast form comes upon this secret meeting in the Spring Court where they're discussing treason. Seeing him as a beast, exactly as he was when he did his Kool-Aid Man into their human cottage a few years ago, it brings back all these memories for Nesta. Last time she was afraid and she cowered, letting Farah step up. But Nesta isn't like that anymore. She's stronger and unafraid to face off with the Tambear Pig this time. She might not be able to change the past filled with shame and cowardly guilt, but she can do something now. Honestly, friends, we could go into Tamlin's current state, but I feel like we covered it pretty extensively in Frost and Starlight, and truthfully, I'm tired of talking about Tamlin. So here's what I'll say. Nowadays, he isn't a High Lord all alone in his manor like he was in Frost and Starlight. These months, he's roaming the land in his beast form, and it's like he's lost all scraps of himself that were still there in Frost and Starlight. He's lost all control. It's like we're in constant claw watch now, and disconnected from his own humanity and the emotional toll of his actions. His self-imprisonment in his beast form alludes to him surrendering entirely to his darker impulses, consumed by grief, regret, and self-loathing. He doesn't think he deserves to be a High Lord anymore. So, to put it simply, he isn't, which puts the Spring Court in such an unstable position. I almost wonder if the land's weakness, which we talked about during Frost and Starlight, reflects Tamlin's state. And until he confronts and heals his own trauma, begins his redemption arc, if there is one, the Spring Court will remain desolate.
Tamlin has been at the heart of so many dark times for Nesta. He took away her youngest sister and destroyed their home. Yes, the money and restoring her father's wealth and blah, 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 blah. But to be honest, Nesta did not know that was happening at the time that Tambear Big Kool-Aid Man in. He unknowingly fell right into Ianthe's hand and the King of Hybern's trap, and was the reason that Nesta and Elaine were thrown into the cauldron. Not to mention he was an abusive partner to her littlest sister, believing her to be his property. Also, not to mention, he is the embodiment of the guilt that she feels for not stepping in to help her sister when she was taken by Man-Bear Pig. She decides that she will not be that coward today. Nesta points her death-promised finger at Tamlin, and the ground shakes, causing Tamlin to be shaken as well. And she tells him he will speak of this to no one. So question for you, death promise finger. Is Tamlin dying?
Well, Amren will later say she almost gave him a death promise finger.
The ground shakes, though. I feel like that's pretty death promisey.
I would not be the saddest if he did.
Oh, I would be. I'm not going to finish that sentence, actually. It depends on the state in which he dies in. Let's say that.
The crew especially Eris, will be nervous that Tamlin will rat them out. Because remember, this depth of their alliance with Eris is hush-hush. You know, that whole thing about them secretly knowing that he plans to kill his father. But I think it says a lot that they're not too concerned, because it's so obvious that Tamlin is that detached from the rest of humanity. During training a few days later, Cassian reveals to Nesta, Gwyn, and Emery that he's picked up on them training to be Valkyries with their breathing exercises. And we get the surprise that he knew the Valkyries 500 years ago and even fought alongside them. I love how excited Gwyn is to hear this. She's been researching the Valkyries for a while, and here's someone who can provide a secondhand account. You'd think there would be more people to interview about the Valkyries, considering how long the Fae can live, but I suppose Meryl does not have those external resources outside the library. In classic Gryffindor fashion, Cassian had wanted to help the Valkyries defend the Minier Pass. It was a suicide mission without the Illyrians' help during the battle, but alas, he was a common foot soldier with no sway, and when he urged his superiors to help, instead they beat him senseless, chained him to a supply wagon, and left him where, oh my goodness, that is terrible. By the time he came to, the Valkyries were slain. This weighs heavy on Cassian's heart and is one more glimpse into his long backstory. He tells Nesta that he hadn't told her sooner because she didn't ask. But I also think it's painful for him to recount as these memories haunt him. And he doesn't want to try to stick his nose in Nesta and her friend's business. He wants to respect what is their own goal without him.
We also know that there was a particular Valkyrie who was very important to Cassian. His first lover outside of the Night Court, Tamwin. Why? Just why?
Yes, and she fell during that big battle. And yeah.
Poor Cassian.
I love the moment where Nesta declares that they are to be the Valkyries born again. Quote, she'd meant it in jest, but the words rumbled through the space, as if she'd spoken some great truth, something that had made fate sit up. Nicole, we were just talking about how when she made the death promise that it the ground rumbled. I wonder if her making these kind of promises, these declarations, are magic, almost like a bargain with the land or with fate itself. There's mention of a chill breathing down Nesta's spine. And while this could just be emphasis on the impactful moment, I can't help but wonder if it's the mother subtly confirming yes. And what's on Nesta's spine? The 8-pointed star, which, by the way, that's the move they're learning today with swords. Maybe it's not a coincidence that today the 8-pointed star is coming up as a battle technique, and it symbolizes Nesta's bigger role in this world, in fate, and with her bargain tattoo of the 8-pointed star on her back, and what that symbolizes for her future, her lineage, and what she's destined to be.
Damn, Lexi, that was good. That night at the River House, it is a classic in the dining room Inner Circle evening. The reason for this dinner was called to find out what Feyre's vote was regarding Nesta's knowledge of the blades. But conversation turns to learning about the Valkyries reborn again. And you can almost hear the joy in Feyre and Elaine's voices as the two ask about them. My headcanon is that this is them realizing that Nesta is finding her own inner circle, her family, her purpose, her joy, and they're just so excited for their sister.
Yes, absolutely. While they're talking about the Valkyries, there's a very interesting line about their king. Amren says, quote, never let a male boss them around, though I could have done without their foolish king. He is as much to blame for their deaths as the Illyrians who walked away during that battle. I feel like there's something important to that mention of a king. Note that Amren uses present tense with that, quote, he is as much to blame. But alas, we don't know any more about this king of the Valkyries. I've been thinking about who this king could be, but honestly, I don't think it's anyone we've met since he would have had to be around 500 years ago, which is not that long for Fae. Maybe we'll learn more about him though. I had originally thought the Valkyrie were located in Prythian, but if they had a king, it would have had to be on the continent. The only king we know of is the king of Valahan, which we know has a hot temper. But I don't know, it doesn't feel like that fits. And this would have been a king of the Valkyrie special territory, which has now been absorbed into other lands.
Well, that Valahan they're really connected to Valhalla in Norse mythology. So I actually don't think it's out of the question for their king to be the king of Valahan. I will also say, while I looked up anything and everything Valkyries, there's no mention of a king in Valkyries associated with Norse mythology. However, the Valkyries in Norse mythology, they're warrior women who decide the fate of fallen soldiers, and they take those fallen soldiers to Odin, who is the main god in Norse mythology, who is a very wise, one-eyed old man. Maybe that's the king of Valhalla? I don't know.
So yeah, could be very interesting there. Elaine shares a story about how skilled of a dancer and schemer Nesta was, even at 14 when their family was at the height of their wealth. Well, supposed wealth. They were actually in a lot of debt. She offers insight into Nesta's backstory, giving us readers and the Inner Circle a glimpse into her grooming and how their mother twisted Nesta's creative joys into a social climber's weapon. It's a way for us to understand Nesta was never given a chance to simply be. Everything needed a sharpened purpose, needed to be turned into a weapon. Mama Archeron saw her talent as a dancer and ensured Nesta learned from an early age to be the best. Nesta loved dancing and music, and she could bring a ballroom to a halt when she danced, which she used to her advantage because there was another young heiress who had her eye on a handsome duke who had come all the way from the continent to find a bride. So, out of spite, Nesta made sure she was the best dressed girl at the ball, and she spent a small fortune on her gown and jewels.
Which it's time for Fit Watch. Nesta, truly looking the part of the merchant's daughter, is wearing diamonds and pearls and an amethyst silk gown with gold thread. I'm not going to count this towards the queen count. However, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that purple is the color of royalty.
That's right. Nesta made an entrance and acted uninterested in the Duke, knowing he got bored with girls chasing after him. This lured him into asking her for a dance, and Nesta stole the dance that young heiress wanted so deeply to secure her own bid for marriage. Nesta's dancing was so good that the Duke proposed marriage to her the next morning. Nesta wasn't actually interested in him though, and plus she was too young. She just wanted to punish the heiress for her cruelty toward Elaine. Nesta was also holding out for a prince. She believed she deserved better than a Duke, which I appreciate this little detail, knowing that she ends up with Cassian, who thinks of himself as a bastard nobody, but he is so much more.
Even Cassian has a moment of like, oh my God, wait, is that what she wants? He's still so all insecure, Cassian. I just want to give him a big hug.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, it is officially time to start training as a Valkyrie, and it turns out it's fucking hard. I love that they've been doing these big, tough Illyrian male routines, and now when they're doing the Valkyrie routines, it's like, oh my God, these are impossible. It really just makes my feminine empowerment brain really happy, which Cassian knew that they would pull some sort of, well, then you do it bullshit. So he was down here at dawn doing the Valkyrie exercises to make sure that if he was going to torture them, he would have to be able to back it up. I love that.
Me too. That is so on brand for Cassian and how empathetic he is. He will never ask anyone to do anything in training that he has not already done, that he cannot do himself. Cassian, not so subtly, asks Nesta what she would name a sword. And look, I get he's nervous to approach this subject with Nesta and inform her that her powers have the capability to create new magical weapons that can change the course of history. But Cassian, this is not how you initiate a very sensitive, life-altering discussion. Feyre voted in favor of telling Nesta about the swords and her power to make objects channeling the Cauldron's magic. Why is he being so secretive? I suppose he's trying to gauge on Nesta's response to having a weapon, and based on her answer is how he'll approach the news with her. Maybe he's nervous about how to share this with her as much as he wants to tell her this. It feels so weird how he's approaching this topic with her.
I'll also say this is probably highly classified information. Maybe talk about this behind closed doors, my guy.
Yes, exactly. Cassian, what you should do is sit down with Nesta in the evening at the House of Wind, in the dining room, in privacy, and not at training, and tell her about what happened with the blacksmith, instead of it seeming like a big fucking secret. But yes, all of this to say, this does not go well. Gwen and Emery offer ideas of the sword's name, and Cassian just keeps pushing Nesta for what she would name it, to which she finally responds, Killer. Oh dear, that's not promising to start a conversation that she has the ultimate power against enemies. Which, by the way, I love that the meaning of the name she ends up picking is inner peace in the old Fae language. Very, very different from Killer. As we all know, Cassian wears his heart on his sleeve, and it doesn't take much to get Cassian to open up about why he was asking about naming a sword. Which, again, this was information he had already planned to tell her. So yeah, Cassian, you fumbled this. You let yourself get backed into a corner where you shared way more information than you needed to in a very inappropriate time. And just, I love you, Cassian, but I am giving you a lowercase L here for how avoidable this disaster was.
Even as he begins telling her about the blacksmith, it says, quote, he crossed his arms, then uncrossed them. Cassian is someone who generally does not back down. He is a unmovable wall of muscle stone. But this shift in his says the woman who just gave him a lowercase L. But this shift in his stance is a show don't tell for us readers that he's nervous to bring it up with her, and she sniffs that out instantly.
Because instead of sharing this news with her up front, it's like he's now having to admit the secret and having to explain what happened on the defense. There's such a big difference.
As you can imagine, this news is not taken very well. And while I do not agree with how Nesta deals with these emotions, I 100% understand how she feels hurt by this news. Number one, it never feels good to know that people were talking behind your back, but to also know that they weren't only talking about her, but they were judging her, weighing on everything she's done to see if she's worthy of knowing information about herself. Number two, coming back to her biggest trigger at the beginning of the book, being controlled. Her future in this instance was not her own to decide. It was up for a vote by the Inner Circle, already people she doesn't really like. Number three, while we can see that the ultimatum at the beginning of the book was ultimately to help her, this is not out of helping her. This is out of believing her unworthy of knowledge that could alter her life. This is out of them thinking the worst of her when she's been trying to be better. It's almost like all of this growth she's been doing the past few months meant nothing in their eyes, or at least two of their eyes, because some, recent Amren, judged her based off of who she was, not the person who she's worked incredibly hard to now be. Number four, when Cassian tells her how we voted, it immediately puts Nesta back in the me against them position. When her and Cassian first started sleeping together, it was very clear. This is you and me, my friends, the Inner Circle. It has nothing to do with us. But now with Cassian and thus the Inner Circle and this whole voting situation, and specifically him saying we, Nesta again feels like she's on the outside looking through a window.
It doesn't matter that Cassian didn't want a vote in the first place, and he stuck up that Nesta needed to know. He still compromised on the vote and, in a sense, chose the Inner Circle over Nesta, his mate, even though I know that they're not officially mates yet. This hurts for Nesta. You know what, Cass? I'm upgrading your lowercase L to a capital L because you took this from bad to way worse. I know your heart was in the right place and you're still my number one book boyfriend, but I'm mad at you.
At least he told her. I'm just going to say
I know. Like, he told her and all of that. And I know that he was up against Rhys and Amren, who are the number one and number two of the Inner Circle. I get there's that sense of hierarchy. And I agree
with you.
Yeah.
A capital L is definitely deserved here. And I'll say capital L not only for Cassian, but the entire Inner Circle. Because how they handled this is terrible. And I'm about to get it way more into that. Right away, though, we see Nesta's inner monologue change right back to what it was at the beginning of the book. Self-hatred, fear of losing her friends, negativity. It oozes out of each sentence as she leaves the training ring. Ugh.
Unable to stop the roaring in her head, Nesta pretends to run a bath and make Cassian think that's what she's doing when he unsurprisingly stops by to try to talk to her. Ugh, my heart hurts. Quote, she waited until she sensed him leave, giving up on her as everyone else had done. Goes right back to what Nicole said, how all her progress doesn't even seem to matter to them, and they only judge her on who she was. Do a few weeks and months erase more than a year of cruelty and unpredictability? Maybe not. No. But it warrants empathy instead of this blanket judgment she still isn't worthy.
Yeah.
And especially what you were saying earlier about how Cassian said we, she is putting him in that category too now. After the house confirmed Cassian is gone, which I love how the house is helping her, she sneaks to the stairs and unleashes the raging in her heart. The negative thoughts are crashing down on her, sending her spiraling down just like she's going down those stairs. She's not fueled by her own determination or goal. She is blinded by her fury and the roaring in her head and the crack down the center of her heart. She is literally heartbroken. Her pain and hurt sent her down the stairs. She's unable to think or feel beyond the emotions. That anger that Amren had suddenly given up on her, and she is feared and hated. And then the stairs suddenly stop and she's at the door. I remember reading this for the first time and feeling rather hollow and empty, not in a bad or disappointed storytelling way, but so much sadness for Nesta, because this was a goal she made for herself to get down the stairs. And once she reaches it, There's no celebration, not even any acknowledgement, because she is so consumed by her emotions. Quote, rage rippled like a storm around her. Nesta stepped back into Valaris at last. With the chills when I read that, and not in a good kind. Again, great storytelling, but my heart just hurts so much because I want to celebrate this, and we can't. And yet I'm still saying huzzah because I want to celebrate Nesta getting down the stairs, even if the motivation is not the best.
On the bright side, she does go down and then up the stairs, and that's when we get to celebrate with her, which brings me to Stair Math Rage Addition. Do you get it? Addition? Because addition, like the math?
Oh, yes, I do get it. I did not get it until you were to explain it to me.
Nesta makes it down the 10,000 steps, as Lexi said, which is the equivalent of 1.43 miles or 2.3 kilometers or 6.3 trips down the Empire State Building. Again, this is only one way because she doesn't go back up, but she does go on a multi-day hike after this. My legs would be dead. Nesta really struggles to manage her stress and the negative emotions that come with it. And I get it. The amount of times that I've been like, oh, if I just journal this out, I'll be fine. And then it's like, I'm more charged up now. But recently, Ritual has had my back. Start your morning with Ritual's Stress Relief. This product uses first of its kind technology to support the body's natural cortisol response so you can take on the daily juggle.
I've loved making Ritual part of my morning routine. It gives me so much peace of mind knowing that I'm starting my day off doing something for me for the whole day. Plus, when I take my daily Ritual, I know that they use ingredients that have been clinically studied to promote stress relief and a positive mood.
There's so much in our lives that we can't control, and we all know the juggle is real. Don't just respond to stress. Get ahead of it with stress relief from Ritual. Get 25% off your first month at ritual.com/FFG. Start Ritual or add stress relief to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/FFG for 25% off.
So, where does Nesta go now that she's made it back to the streets of Valaris?
Nesta rage barges into Amren's loft apartment, slamming her hand on the door, and it absolutely shatters underneath her touch. Really just showing not only her powers, but her rage are so in sync right now. Only to find Amren straddling Varian, riding him to victory. But sadly, actually not so sadly, I'm kind of glad that their sex session got cut off right now. I'm about to get mad at Amren. But that victory is cut short with Nesta growling, "You."
That would terrify me, by the way. Like, you never want to be on the receiving end of Nesta saying that.
No, especially when she points her death promise finger at you. But before we get into Nesta's hurt, her L's, and her overall POV during the scene, I want to take a second and look at this through Amren's eyes. Because after noting that, quote, the loudmouth bastard told her too much, which, woof, Amren, that was unnecessary to call Cassian that. Didn't like that. Amren lays into her reasons as to why she did not vote in Nesta's favor. For months, Amren was Nesta's tutor and then her friend when no one else was, and frankly, Nesta pushed everyone else away. And during that time, Amren told everyone to just give Nesta time. Give her time. She'll find a way out of this. Which brings us to the barge party, where Nesta and Amren had it out completely. After not training together, Amren offered to teach her more, but it was at Feyre's request, and Nesta walked away, believing Amren to be siding with Feyre. But Amren took that as giving up on her powers, on her place in this court, on her family, and most importantly, giving up on herself.
And she believed Nesta was so hot-headed and spoiled after Amren said she offered to teach her at Feyre's request. Nesta twisted Amren's words to fit her own narrative, and she can't be relied upon to look beyond her own narrow-minded emotional issues.
And this is how Amren voted for Nesta, based on the woman who ran off that barge, who drank herself into the hole, who fucked strangers. And Amren believes Nesta fucking Cassian is just more of that same pattern. Looking through Amren's POV, I understand that she is mad here. I'm still giving Amren a big L. A, because she's not giving Nesta any credit for... And frankly, she doesn't want to. The fact that Amren's telling Nesta that she doesn't know what the word friend means just shows how out of the loop, willingly or unwillingly, I'm going to go with willingly, Amren is from what Nesta's life looks like now. Especially because just earlier in this chapter stretch, Nesta was lovingly calling Emery and Gwen her friends.
I absolutely hear you. I will say, I don't feel like Amren would have had the opportunity, even if she did want to seize it, to see how Nesta is with her friends. That's what we've been saying with Nesta's ability to have these friendships away from baggage like Amren. But you bring up a really good point about Amren not wanting to even look at this as a possibility, not wanting to hear Nesta's progress and really feel this sense of pride and growth for her.
I see what you're saying, and I'll argue that Nesta and Feyre have also not been put in the position where they would be able to see Nesta's progress, and yet they still acknowledge it because they're listening.
Absolutely.
Reason number 2 why I'm giving Amren an L, because of how she handles the scene. Nesta is angry, and yes, we're going to get to that. I'm not discounting that. But Amren met fire with fire here. What the hell happened to reaching out your hand, Amren? And last but not least, because of this line, quote, that you believe Feyre doesn't love you only proves that you're unworthy of your power. Anyone that willfully blind cannot be trusted. You would be a walking nightmare with those weapons. Whew. Amren isn't looking at why Nesta doesn't want Feyre to love her. And I would argue that she knows the reason. And again, I think she's willingly not wanting to acknowledge it because she's that mad at Nesta.
I also think that she is very detached from emotions. Like, we know that about Amren. That is very much in character for Amren. And so Amren doesn't have time for Nesta's bullshit emotions and trauma here. And she doesn't really want to tap into the why behind it because that's just not her personality, completely opposite of Cassian.
And just so we're all on the same page, the reason why Nesta doesn't believe Feyre to love her is because she doesn't believe that she's deserving of the kind of love that Feyre would offer. So she's pushing it away and pushing it away. Yes, I'm totally hearing you. And honestly, I agree. And you'd be a walking nightmare. Ooh, that's harsh.
Especially after she had been talking about reaching out your hand. It's like everybody else can reach out their hand, but not her.
Yeah, because she's too mad at Nesta.
Exactly.
And again, she is mad at the Nesta that left the barge. And I get it.
She has every right to be mad at that Nesta. She even is within her own right to not forgive Nesta. She's not ready yet. And yeah. I'm not defending Amren, by the way, either. No. I know I sound like it. I'm more playing devil's advocate here because, again, this book, it has so many different dynamics. And it's really interesting to look at it from all those different perspectives.
Couldn't agree more.
So now that we do have Amren's perspective in this, let's shift to Nesta's and expand on what Nicole explained earlier. Amren was once the person Nesta connected with, related to, and respected most in Valaris because of her blunt, no-nonsense attitude, among other reasons. Now Amren is directly calling out Nesta's worst fears and insecurities by saying she's reckless and self-destructive, she'd be a walking nightmare, and the only way she'll truly grow and get stronger is by tackling her inner demons. It's not far off from Nesta's own negative self-talk. In fact, it's very reflective of that. It's practically word for word what Nesta has for her own negative self-talk. But hearing it from Amren, of all people, who Nesta has respected and looked up to, it escalates her hurt and self-consciousness of being judged and misunderstood. Because it's rooted in truth, and Nesta knows it and is in full-blown me defensive mode, as we've seen from her. When she gets really defensive, she gets extra aggressive. Plus, Amren is part of the Inner Circle and Feyre's perfect new family. Nesta's feelings about Amren are intertwined with her complicated relationship with her youngest sister, as we learned from the barge party and what Amren and her are talking about right here about Feyre loving her. This confrontation is a way for Nesta to indirectly address her bitterness towards Feyre's acceptance with this close-knit family that has Nesta looking in from a window. Amren, I won't call her a scapegoat because there's plenty of reasons for her to be upset with her, but Amren is that person that she can get mad at versus Cassian, who is also in the Inner Circle, for instance. They consciously exclude her, Amren apparently most of all, and that reinforces why Nesta was so angry at her months ago. To be loyal to Feyre automatically means judgment and distance with Nesta. It's interesting because this is not the same relationship that she has with Cassian. It was at first, but Cassian has, for lack of a better word, proved himself that they have their own relationship. Nesta has been so hurt that she lost her friend Amren to perfect Feyre, or felt like she never had her in the first place.
And I also think that Nesta fears that if a friend like Amren could turn this much hatred onto her and believe her to be so horrible, what's stopping Gwen and Emery from doing the same?
Exactly.
Nesta.
This is a direct reflection on Nesta's sense of self-worth and makes her question if she really has changed at all. Like, there's even that line where she's wondering if she has. And she has had so much growth, and for her now to question that, It's her questioning her sanity, practically. And if people like Amren, who she once was so close to, think this poorly of her and doesn't think she even knows what a friend is, it's only a matter of time until her new friends follow suit, which must mean Nesta really does deserve to be alone and in pain. And for her, when she feels this way, she lashes out to the extreme so others feel that same hurt and she can bring them down with her. It hurts even saying this because we've been so pro Nesta, and when we're talking about her in this way, it's not good, it's not healthy, and it's so nuanced because I also understand her and I sympathize for her. And I wish that she had a better way of coping with this.
Yes.
This is all to the point where Amren even wonders if she's going to point her finger with a death promise to her too, like she almost did with Tamlin, like we were talking about earlier. How little Amren thinks of her is just getting worse and worse with this confrontation, where Nessa's like, you think I would do that to you? And Amren's pretty much like, yeah, I do.
A new person enters the apartment, though. Paint splattered like she just came from the studio. Feyre walks in. Walks is actually not the case. She barges in. And her second words after "stop this" are, quote, "Nesta, it should not have come out as it did." This is how this should have been handled, rather than doubling down on reasons why she's unworthy of this information. But instead, like Feyre does here, how the Inner Circle made a mistake with the way that they told her, and how it should have been her information from the start. It's not putting their tail between their legs, but it's rather saying, we respect you to know that this was not the way you should have found out. Regardless, though, Nesta is way too far in her own anger.
Yeah, Cassian really fumbled on this.
I know, like, I love Cassian, but wow, dude.
It's too little too late.
Yeah.
Feyre is the third Inner Circle person Nesta is talking to about this. And only now she's truly hearing that. Well, actually, no, that's not true, because Cassian was trying to backtrack here, kind of like Feyre is right now. He's like, no, that's not what I meant, blah, blah, blah.
That's
but
true.
she was too far gone the moment the conversation went south with Cassian. So even if Amren had said this, I don't think it would have gotten through to Nesta. I mean, I don't think it would have escalated to the point that it did. But when it comes to Nesta, this kind of situation does need to be treated delicately. And Cassian did not do so.
No.
I love him. I really do. And I see where he was kind of going with it with the sword and all of that. But oh man, no.
It's about to get worse, though.
Yeah, here we go. The moment Feyre mentions respecting Amren, Nesta spits back a challenge about anyone else like her mate respecting her, which makes Feyre go, what are you talking about? And Nesta, not caring and unable to think beyond the roaring in her head, tells Feyre that the babe in her womb will kill her. Amren gets another L for shouting at her to shut her mouth, making it all the more obvious that this was information to be kept from Feyre. And here we have another moral dilemma of the book. On the one hand, Feyre needed to know the truth about the fatal problem of her baby having wings. We'll learn she's glad to know the truth and that Nesta had the courage to tell her when no one else did. It is absolutely 100% within Feyre's right to know what will happen to her own body, health, and future severe complications. On the other, this was not Nesta coming from a place of honoring her sister's right to know, or even worry for her sister or guilt that she was keeping the secret from her. It is entirely driven by anger and hurt. She's not sharing this information to help Feyre. She's seeking to wound her sister just as much as she herself has been hurt. Nesta stormed down the 10,000 stairs into Amren's apartment because she was so upset that Amren didn't trust her to know crucial information. And here her sister is, all of them withholding very important information from her too. So Nesta is like, you deserve to know, just like I did. But again, it's not coming from a place of concern. She has malicious intent, so fueled by her own hurt that they thought about not telling her information that now she's like, oh yeah? How do you like that?
Yep.
And that word respect really triggered her into this place of no return. For how much the Inner Circle talks of respecting each other, they're not backing it up with their own actions. I hate saying that because I love the Inner Circle so much, but it's true.
It's true.
And Nesta hates hypocrites. So yeah, she's pissed that they think they're all honorable and respectful of each other, when really they're secretive and judgmental as they make life-altering decisions on behalf of the person who apparently can't be trusted with the information.
Retweet. And I'll even add that later, as Cassian and Feyre agree upon mind to mind, it's almost like Nesta saw this as a way to avenge both of their situations, but agreed 100% that this is not from a place of, let me, for the good of the people, avenge us. It's from, You said it perfectly. Well, how do you like that? Like that right there encompasses everything. It was from a place of rash decisions of trying to be righteous and true anger. The moment the tears start showing up on her younger sister's eyes, Nesta knows she fucked up. But not because Fae-vorite didn't deserve to know, like Lexi was saying, but much like how it came out about Nesta learning the truth of the weapons, the execution of this truth was not great.
And more than anything, Fae-vorite feels betrayed by her mate. And she's like, Rhys knew, like that is what's really getting her here, is that her mate betrayed her. Not everybody else who also did, but Rhys of all people.
The second Nesta realizes that she did not say this from a place of love, but instead from a place of righteous indignation, she knows that she went too far. Nesta notices how much Fae-vorite loves her unborn child with just a touch to her abdomen, and it hits Nesta like a physical blow. Nesta has never known this level of firsthand love. She only learned about her father's love far too late, and she blames herself for it. Remember back a few episodes ago, love was not really in Nesta's vocabulary growing up. She was not loved by her mother or grandmama, two people who shaped her to who she now is. And here, Nesta is having just tainted this unconditional, different, full of love that Fae-vorite is having with her own baby. She's tainted it now with sadness and fear. Nesta was slowly rewriting that inner belief that she's not deserving of love, happiness, joy, friendship, etc. But here she is, having so royally hurt someone that all of that progress comes crashing down in guilt, anger, and shame.
When she realizes she went too far with hurting her sister and there's no taking it back, that Fae-vorite loves this baby so much and Nesta didn't even take her sister's reaction to this terrible news into account, something within Nesta breaks.
L, and we haven't given Nesta a formal L. L.
Yes, L for Nesta. Again, she focused only on the fact that this was a secret that needed to be shared versus what learning the secret's impact would be. Amren sneers at her, asking if she's content now, because this was her intention, right? Yes, kind of, yeah. For Fae-vorite to feel a fraction of her own hurt and betrayal with the secret being kept from her. But Nesta immediately regrets it and is so ashamed. So without knowing what else to say or do, she runs from the apartment. Shifting back to Cassian, who realizes he's made several mistakes of his own, like how clumsy he was in asking Nesta about a sword name, I agree, and then letting her take a bath to cool off. He should know her better than this. I'm sorry, why am I being so mean to my Cassian?
We love Cassian. He's going to be great next episode, hopefully.
And then he follows Nesta's scent down the stairs until he reaches the bottom. Then his third mistake is going to the river house, thinking that's where Amren is. He already figured Nesta would confront her ex-friend, so he assumed that's where Nesta went. Except that's obviously not where Nesta went, because she doesn't like the river house and used to frequent Amren's apartment.
I also have a mistake number 4 for Cassian, just to really drill it in, my guy. Because why did you run down the stairs after Nesta? You should have flown down to the stair door, then climbed up until you ran into her, because it would have taken Nesta a long time to run down the stairs. Here we go. The fastest runners can run up all 86 floors of the Empire State Building in 10 minutes, which, wow, that's fast.
Wow, yes.
And the 10,000 steps are equivalent to 6.34 trips up the Empire State Building. Even though Nesta's not the fastest runner in the world, she is driven by so much fury and rage. She's also going down, and she's also high fae. So I'm going to actually keep with the 10 minutes per trip of Empire State Building equivalent to these 10,000 steps, which means it still would have taken her 1 hour and just over 3 minutes to go down the stairs. Cassian, that would have been plenty of time for you to go down to the bottom of the stairs, fly down, and then go up the stairs so you meet her wherever she's at, rather than have a delayed whatever. Anyway, in Rhys's office, oh boy, Rhys turns to Cassian, his voice filled with darkness and nightmares. Not normally how we hear Rhysand speak, but
it's the first time he's ever spoken that way to Cassian as well. And Cassian's like, uh-oh.
But here, oh boy, he shares with his friend that Nesta saw fit to share the information about the babe with Fae-vorite. And oh brother, you better get this bitch out of the city before I fucking kill her. Okay, we gotta talk about this. Rhys will later admit that he overreacted. And while I do not agree with him not telling Feyre, as I've been very clear on this podcast. I can understand why he is so angry here at first. Just like Nesta deserved to find out another way, Feyre deserved to find out another way about the baby. Ideally, by her mate, husband, and father of her child behind closed doors. It's fine. And as we know, Fae males with their partners when they're pregnant are feral, and they will slaughter anything that presents as a possible harm to them. And right now, Nesta is ding, 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 that exactly.
And part of Rhys's anger is misdirected at Nesta because he should be really angry at himself for putting his mate in this position in the first place. I will say I was also under the impression that Rhys wouldn't have actually killed Nesta. I understand a lot of the fandom is under the impression and taking him at face value here. Would the primal male in him want to? Yes. Did he overreact as he admits? Yes. And I take this more as someone who is extremely angry, lashing out and saying things that they don't necessarily truly mean. How many of us have over-exaggerated in our own anger?
I agree with you. This is more just to show how fucking pissed he is at what Nesta did.
Yes, and with all of that said, Cassian is not going to keep Nesta around and find out if this is the case or not. Even if Rhys isn't capable of literally killing Nesta, he is in primal Fae male mode right now, and his pregnant mate is hurt, and he is after the person who hurt her. Now, of course, we also think that he has the responsibility of that too. But anyway, no matter what, if Nesta sticks around, she will be on the receiving end of a very, very, very bad Rhys wrath. And Cassian's like, nope, we're not going to risk anything here. We got to get out.
Well, not to mention Cassian's also furious with Nesta, as we'll discuss next episode.
Yes.
I do want to give Rhys and the entirety of the Inner Circle one big capital L here. Later, when Cassian and Nesta are in the woods, Feyre starts speaking to Cassian mind to mind, and he says that he's furious with Nesta. And Feyre's like, well, I'm not. She had the guts to tell me what you cowards wouldn't. She's so calm in the face of this information. Quote, the alternative is fear and panic. I will not let my son feel those things. I will fight for him, for us, until I no longer can. I am livid on behalf of Feyre because no one gave her any flipping credit that this might just be the way that she handles this news. As Cassian will note, he didn't ever know why he would expect her to act differently. So L, Inner Circle, give your High Lady more credit for how emotionally stable she can be. She faced the Ouroboros mirror. Homegirl has so much power over her own mind and fears. Like, did they just forget that? And they're like, oh, well, she almost fell apart under the mountain when she was human. And this was her first run-in with the... Like, I'm done. I'm so mad.
I agree with everything you're saying. And I get frustrated with how Mary Sue, Feyre's character, is written here. I'm not upset with her response. I'm upset with how her response is written, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely.
Maybe it's because we're not in her POV like we're used to, as we've talked about before. But her calm and collected response feels so one-dimensional.
Yes.
And I want more from her. Her character deserves more development with what she's going through. And for her to just be like, it's okay, we'll face this. Like, yes, that's wonderful. Good that she is thinking like that. And I understand that she's wanting to protect the baby within her and not cause herself extra stress. And this is kind of a big deal. And I feel like there was a lot of opportunity for there to be a little bit more character complexities here and for it to be a little bit more nuanced.
Well, let's not forget that when she found out about the mate situation from the Suriel, she went to a cabin for 3 days. Like,
yes,
and didn't speak to anyone because she was so angry. And yes, I understand that she's like, I don't want my son to feel those things. And I do admire her for that. And I think you said it perfectly with one-dimensional. Like, Sarah J. Maas has beautifully written these gray area characters. And I feel like this was just straight up morally good rather than having that, I'm really pissed at you and here's what I'm going to do about it, rather than just saying, I'm furious with all of you. Like, it's like there was such an opportunity for us to understand what she did with that anger and still have her say, I am going to feel calm because of my child. I am going to be the bigger person eventually. Here's what I'm going to do about you all fucking up, because it's just, I'm furious with all of you. And then that's the last of it.
All right. Well, next episode, I am so excited. We're going to be getting into the hike and this dynamic between Cassian and Nesta and the iconic lake scene. I can't wait.
I will be crying. I'm so excited.
All right, well, let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing, important moments in the rest of this book, and speculations for what's next in the series. I'll go first. I don't even know if it's worth mentioning because it's all over the pages, but the mate's foreshadowing where Cassian subtly knows Nesta is his mate. Like when he's watching Farrah and Rhys be sensual with each other and how much he yearns for that casual intimacy versus what he gets, which is just sex. It's a direct comparison between what this mated couple has and what he has with his mate.
As they're training, Cassian teaches Nesta a pressure point that will down any opponent and cause them to collapse. This is the same pressure point that Nesta hits on Gwen so that Nesta can go defend the pass while Emery carries Gwen up the mountain.
Nesta thinks about how much Elaine will love the spring court. Quote, the spring court had been made for someone like her. The more and more we deep dive, the more I'm leaning toward Elaine bringing order back to the spring court. I am not saying she'll end up with Tamlin. I have no idea how this would all work with the magic and such. But at this point, I'll be surprised if she doesn't play a significant role in whatever's next for the spring court territory. Because it desperately needs help.
Well, okay, so we talked earlier about Tamlin having a death promise finger on him. What if he dies and the magic of the land just chooses Elaine? That seems like the easiest way to from point A to point B in my mind. Yes, it ends up with Tamlin dying, and honestly, not mad about it. At dinner, where Elaine shares about Nesta being a dancer, it dawns on Cassian that fighting is only part of it for Nesta. Another huge part is the need for music. I'm assuming that this is where he got the idea for the Symphonia for Winter Solstice.
Absolutely. When Fae-vorite finds out about the true complications of the baby having wings, she is in disbelief that Rhys knew about the threat to their lives, and then she looks down at her tattooed hand. She's not just talking about the baby. She alone knows that this also means Rhys's life too because of the bargain that marks her hand.
It is time to sip some tea with a Suriel. Every episode, Lexi will sit down with a Suriel and sip some tea and walk us through a world building topic to help us better understand this world and the people in it.
Today's Suriel topic is the Valkyries. I'm so excited to finally do the Suriel. First things first, what are the Valkyries? The Valkyries are our first tier of Patreon members. But that's not what we're talking about here today because Nicole already covered it. The Valkyries used to be a clan of female warriors from another territory. Their territory is gone now, incorporated into others, assumably after the war 500 years ago. Valkyrie is a title, the highest honor in their land, but it's not a race. The Valkyrie warriors hailed from every type of Fae, usually recruited from birth or early childhood. They fought when the bravest males wouldn't, and they never let a male boss them around. In other words, they were badass female warriors. All right, let's get into their history. The Valkyries existed for millennia. According to Amryn, they had a, quote, foolish king, who she says is as much to blame for their deaths as the Illyrians who walked away during that battle. I feel like there's something important to that mention of a king like we talked about earlier, but alas, we don't know any more about him. The Valkyries fought during the war 500 years ago, and we at least know Cassian and the Illyrians fought beside the Valkyries for 5 battles. Since they fought on the same side, it's safe to assume the Valkyries fought for the humans' freedom. I also feel like that would be something the Valkyries would absolutely 100% do. Let's talk about this battle that led to most of their deaths. During the war 500 years ago, most of the Valkyries died at the Battle of Menhir Pass, located in the Gallian Mountains. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And no, unfortunately, we have no idea where that is, but rumor claims its rock remains barren to this day, as if the earth still mourns the loss of these brave female warriors. The Valkyries knew this was a suicide mission from the start, but they went in anyway in an effort to save the pass. By this emphasis on saving the pass, I wonder if Menhir Pass was in their territory or what its significance was. Was it protecting innocence? I don't know. No one, not even Cassian, knows why they fought to save it or what the politics were behind protecting the pass. But we know that, unfortunately, the Illyrians refused to help the Valkyries, and it seems the Valkyries went into this battle completely on their own. According to Gwen, the few survivors were elderly enough to quickly fade into old age and die afterwards from the shame. They let themselves die, rather than face the shame of their lost battle and surviving when their sisters had not. The history and training of the Valkyries was passed down orally, so any accounts we have come from what passing historians, philosophers, or tradespeople wrote down, which equals out to bits and pieces scattered in various books. Like one military tome in the priestess's library included only one paragraph on Valkyrie ambush strategies. There are no primary sources beyond a few precious scrolls. Wouldn't it be nice if they talked to somebody who had also fought beside the Valkyries, huh? There may not be a whole lot about the Valkyries all in one place until now, as Meryl currently writes a book about the comprehensive history of of the Valkyries. And it is, of course, being revived by Nesta Archeron, Gwyneth Badara, and Emery, to which Meryl will soon include a chapter about them in her book about the Valkyries. Now it's time to talk Valkyrie training. Like I mentioned, they were recruited from birth or early childhood. There are 3 stages of training. Number 1, novice. Number 2, blade. And number 3, finally, Valkyrie. They fought with shields, swords, and knives. Valkyries learned to use their shields as deadly weapons in addition to their swords. They'd also use shields as springboards for launching a fellow Valkyrie into the skies. Valkyries were fearless and brilliant individual fighters. They trained their minds to be weapons as sharp as any blade, so they were unshakable opponents. And their true strength lay in being a highly trained unit. Training exercises include Valkyrie lunge, which I'll be honest, I'm unsure what makes this unique, but apparently it's really hard to hold. Valkyrie sprints, which are 10 seconds at a full sprint, 30 seconds trotting, another 10 seconds of sprinting for 15 minutes straight. Once they can get through that, add the shields. And after they achieve that, add the swords. This is designed to build their stamina and focus on controlling their breathing between bursts of attack and retreat. They also do their abdominal curls, bearing the weight of their shields, and Valkyries learn to fight in all kinds of weather, especially the cold. And then, of course, we have mind stilling. The Valkyrie version of meditation trains them to calm their minds and emotions because heightened feelings are distracting in the face of an opponent. They use it to stay calm up against their fears, to calm themselves after a hard struggle, and to fight the inner demons they possess. Mind stilling involves breathing and becoming aware of one's own body and then learning to let go. It is the act of quieting your mind. Now, listeners, I'm going to do something that I don't think I've ever done before, and that is give you homework. We are all going to practice mind stilling after this episode. So listen up because I'm about to go through it step by step. Step 1, get into a comfortable seated position. Step 2, take 3 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth for a count of 6 each. And be sure to close your eyes. Step 3, let your breathing steady and focus on the sounds around you. Acknowledge them and then let them fade away. Step 4, survey your body, starting at your head, slowly working down toward your toes and assess how you're feeling. Don't dwell on it, simply acknowledge it. Step 5, back to breathing for 10 sets. If a thought pops up, acknowledge it and then send it on its way. Tell yourself, I am the rock against which the surf crashes. Your thoughts are the surf. Let them crash over you. And hey, if you lose count, start over. When you finish your next set of 10, stop counting your breaths and just let your mind do as it wishes. After a few heartbeats, stop. The goal is to work up to longer and longer periods of this. It should feel like the mind lingers and doesn't wander. It's just sitting there, contented and rested, like a cat curled up at your feet. Begin to sink back into your body. Mark the sounds around you. Mark the feelings in your fingers and your toes. Then open your eyes when you're ready. And that's mind stilling. After mastering mind stilling, Valkyrie mind training continues to ultimately go from seated calm, which we were just doing, to active soothing, to be able to steady the mind, focus it while in the midst of chaos, like a battle. Valkyries have a test for whether their training is complete and they're ready for battle. A ribbon hangs from a beam, and the goal is to cut the ribbon in half. Once the ribbon is cut, you are crowned with its severed half and anointed Valkyrie. Trust me, this is harder than you might expect. The new current Valkyries use a mix of Illyrian and Valkyrie fighting techniques, since they are being trained by 2 Illyrian warriors. Last thing to note about Valkyries, the only Valkyrie from before the war whose name we know is Tanwyn, and current Valkyries include Nesta, Gwen, Emery, Rosalind, Deirdre, Ananka, Alana, and Lorelei. And that, friends, is a Suriel Teatime on Valkyries.
Woo! Let us wrap up this ACOTAR-only part of this episode with our Fae-vorite Moments. As Nesta and Gwen are trying mind stilling for the first time, Gwen mentions how she's memorized a step because it's her job. But Nesta comes back with, quote, "You'd have memorized this information anyway." It just is one little show don't tell for us readers that these two are becoming such good friends. Like, Nesta would of course know that Gwen would do this. When Cassian's thoughts turn inappropriate, Helion asks him what he's thinking about. And we get a "your mother" joke. Iconic.
I love that it's from Cassian too. It's like,
course.
Yep, of course. Cassian trying to play it cool around Helion and Nesta. And he really does wear his heart on his sleeve. And I love it so much. I got to start giving him more love right now. Also from that scene, how convenient is it for Rhys to touch someone and get all the info download that he needs? It's good for this fast-paced storytelling, I'll just say.
Yeah. Gwen squeals when she hears that Cassian knew the Valkyries. And quote, Asriel on the other side of the training ring with the rest of the priestesses half turned at the sound, brows high. I just love little details like this. It just feels like such good foreshadowing. When Cassian says that the quote, new Valkyries are something old becoming something new. This absolutely is focused on the Valkyries and the unit that they're training, but I also love the symbolism of what this means for him and Nesta's relationship too. All right, friends, we are about to begin our Maasverse Madness section.
Today's Maasverse Madness includes spoilers for the entire Crescent City series and Empire of Storms from the Throne of Glass series. So if you have not read those books, this is where we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode we will be covering Silver Flames chapters 48 through 55.
But first, a huge thank you to our new members of the Inner Circle for our Patreon. Huge welcome to Rhonda, Leslie, Ashley, Sherry G, Tiffany H, Amanda, Mandy W, and Jacqueline. Welcome.
Yay! We're so excited for you to join us. And if you're also interested in joining the Patreon party, please do go to patreon.com/fantasyfangirls.
Also, you might have noticed that we have been announcing on our social medias that we have decided our next book series. And while we have not told you all just yet, the announcement is coming soon. We've been dropping quite a number of Easter eggs in our social media posts, our stories, our episodes, like this one, and much more. So be on the lookout for said Easter eggs.
And if you're like, oh my gosh, I apparently need to follow them on social media, don't worry, we got you. Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod on Instagram and TikTok.
Also, please do not forget to rate and review the podcast. It takes 5 seconds to do that on your favorite podcasting platform, and it's one of the best things that you can do for the podcast that you listen to. Let's get into Maasverse Madness.
Yes, indeed. All right, friends, we are officially entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode, where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today, we are discussing concepts that give spoilers from all 3 Crescent City books, as well as Empire of Storms from Throne of Glass. So please only continue listening if you've read all of those books. All right, I'm so excited to keep talking about Pegasuses here. The legend about them originating from the island of the prison is correct. When the territory was the lush islands of the Dusk Court and ruled by Queen Thea, her winged horses soared among the clouds. The magic of the land, as we know the territories have, nourished the Pegasuses to thrive in their natural habitat. And the sky literally did devour most of these winged horses because Thea brought them when they opened the realm portal and went to Midgard.
We also know from Celine's download that Thea rode them into the battle on Midgard.
Yes, and in the Prince of Caves, there are carvings of the Pegasuses being slaughtered. I believe most of these creatures died during that big final battle, and the few that survived ended up in Avalon, which makes sense that they ended up with Helena and Peleus, because he became the first Starborn Prince of Midgard, and I think he also ruled over Avalon, because that's where he was buried with the Star Sword. However, after the Asteri were defeated, 24 Pegasuses appeared in Avalon after Bryce frees the land. It's like they sprang out of the earth, like they were hibernating or hiding there for all those thousands of years. Bryce will wonder if Helena somehow kept them secretly alive, waiting until it was safe to appear again. The land of Avalon yielded its lush green lands, holding the power as it was bid until someone with the Star Sword and Truth Teller came to unlock it at the 8-pointed star mark. When Selene returned to the Fae homeland and corrupted the land that was once her mother's Dusk Court, imprisoning evil monsters that caused the islands to shrivel and the earth become barren, I wonder if that's when they went to the Day Court. And it makes me also wonder if there's like a Day Court connection to the magic of the Dusk Court that the Pegasus are drawn to, even if their numbers are dwindling because the natural source that once helped them thrive is gone. All of this to say, what if Nesta does something similar to the prison territory with freeing the land? I know it's barren for different reasons than Avalon, with Selene putting the monsters in the prison, but I could see Nesta freeing the land in a similar fashion. And maybe the Pegasuses will return to their homeland, and Nesta will fly off into the sunset on her winged horse with her Batboy by her side.
Woo! Let's do another thing that we learned from this big old Selene download, and that is about Gwydion. We get the long lost sword Gwydion mentioned in this stretch.
It is so hard not to do a full Suriel Teatime here on Gwydion / a Star Sword. It would be its own mini episode. I pretty much just did one for the Pegasuses, but you know what? I'm going to go dive into this anyway. After Thea and Peleus ensured Fionn died by Kelpie in the Bog of Urid that we learned all about last episode, scaled hands from within the water thrust Gwydion and Truth Teller out of the pool. Thea summoned both blades to her, and when she snatched them, starlight flared from Thea. Gwydion and Truth Teller answered to Thea because she helped make them. They answered to the call in her blood, to her very power, to her starborn power. With Gwydion, Truth Teller, and the Dread Trove, she ruled with unchecked power as High Queen. Amren believes Gwydion disappeared around the same time as the last of the Dread Trove objects, which, correct, it did, because Thea took it with her on the crossing to Midgard.
After Thea came over to Midgard with the sword, she left it with Helena when she transferred some of her power into both of her daughters.
And Helena, with Gwydion and the horn, didn't make it back to Midgard with Selene, who was in possession of Truth Teller and the harp. Peleus, unfortunately, ended up taking Helene and forcing her to be his wife. He also took Gwydion for himself, and I assume he renamed it as the Star Sword. But according to Adis, the Star Sword was supposed to go only to Thea's female heirs. I think that's why Bryce is ultimately the owner of the Star Sword, and it makes sense for the setup that she ends up giving it to Nesta, who may also be a descendant too. As the first prince of the Starborn in Midgard, Peleus Buttface was buried with the Star Sword in the Cave of Princes. Since females were not allowed in the Cave of Princes, there was no opportunity for a female heir to attempt to reclaim it. And yes, it seems like that was a rule about the cave on purpose, so a female heir wouldn't have the chance. Luckily though, Rune ended up retrieving it. I figure Fate knew he would willingly give it to his sister, the female heir of Thea. Okay, sorry, this is getting longer than I meant. So real quick, the Star Sword / Gwydion can defeat death, which definitely makes sense because it was made by the Cauldron and can kill the unkillable. The Autumn King avoids touching it, and I have to wonder if it's for a similar reason that Rhys and the Bat Boys don't touch Nesta's made weapons here. In Midgard, there is a Fae prophecy which says, quote, "When knife and sword are reunited, so shall our people be," referring to both the Star Sword and its twin Truth Teller. So when Bryce reunites them when she travels to the Fae homeland with the Star Sword, she's fulfilling the multi-meaning prophecy, which I know we've talked about in a different Maasverse Madness, so I'll stop here. I love how this is one of the objects that connects these worlds, and Silver Flames just has so many Easter eggs. Last thing to note, I promise. Bryce gives Nesta the Star Sword and tells her to go figure out why she has an 8-pointed star tattooed on her back. Again, tying Nesta to the Starborn and the Dusk Court, and now she has 2 made great swords. Holy shit.
Brava SJM and brava Lexi for pulling that. Let's do some rapid fires now.
Helion thinks one of his ancestors tried to wear the mask before, but as far as we know, the mask was hidden by Thea before departing for Midgard, hence why it was lost to history. At least that lines up with the timeline we have, although we could be wrong. There's never any mention that she hid the mask and crown. That is simply an assumption. And before Thea, the mask was in the Asteri's possession. So is there something more to Helion having such a reaction to the mask's power? Maybe it's connected to why the Pegasuses went to the Day Court, like I was mentioning earlier. Like there's a tie between the Dusk and Day Court. And the mask is warning the High Lord of Day not to mess with the mask, which was wielded by the High Queen of the Dusk Court, and it's warning like not to be corrupt like her. Yeah, I realize that's a stretch, but I'm still pointing it out.
One thing I want to add to the Valkyrie Kings mentioned. So the Valkyries in Norse mythology are connected to, in addition to Odin, the main god in Norse mythology, they're also connected to the land of Hel, spelled the exact same as Crescent City, Hel, H-E-L, as one of the 5 possible locations for the dead to go. I'm massively summarizing that. If you're a Norse mythology person, I know I'm leaving a lot out. Please don't at me. I know. So here's my crack theory. What if one of the princes of Hel is the old king? You mentioned earlier it has to be someone less than 500 years, but we do know that Thanatos exists somewhere on Prithian, so maybe that's my guess. What if it's Thanatos? When the Bat Boys unsheathed the weapons, the great sword, quote, truly glowed like moonlight lay within the metal. After last episode with bringing up Deanna's possession of Aelin and Skull's Bay, and we know that that was Moonfire, I wonder if this Moonfire is at another parallel to the Silverfire being Moonlight?
Oh, I see. I was going to say it's a nod to Nesta's Starborn power. Moonlight, starlight, feels similar. I'm also so riding hard on this Starborn train here too. On the note, speaking of which, of Starborn power and these weapons, I will say Rhys is of Starborn lineage, so theoretically, he should be able to wield these weapons if we're talking about it in the sense of Starborn power. So maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the Starborn power then.
So are you backtracking for yourself?
Just throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall. It's Maasverse. There's no rules in this section.
Last but not least, fucking when you're made. This is such a small thing, but Amren's quote, "I'd be careful when you're fucking her," to Cassian is kind of a valid warning. I know I ripped into Amren so hard this episode, so here's something that she did right. Because technically that's what happened when Bryce transferred some power into Hunt, allowing him then to wield the mask. He was temporarily made with a capital M. So with how much Cassian and Nesta fuck, I'm guessing there's a lot of made points stacked up within Cassian.
All right, friends, one more time. Next episode, we are covering chapters 48 through 55 of Silver Flames. Buckle up. We are going back to the prison. We have the iconic lake scene. It's a doozy.
Thank you to our content researcher, Brooke, and of course to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We flippin' love you both. And last but not least, share this episode with your Silver Flame, put your hands on the headboard obsessed friends. I hope they enjoy it as much as we did talking about it.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Fun fact, Heline's black stallion Pegasus is named Meowlin, whose name
Meow.
have at her, and he goes to town. Only when he's...
I just need to eat a muffin and it'll take 2 bites.
I'm so glad I already started recording.
Oh, Jesus.
Woman. You could have done it in 3.
No, I said 2.
You look like a little chipmunk with your cheeks all filled with muffin.